My cousin Victoria's wedding invitation was exactly what you'd expect from someone who calls herself Manhattan's next big fashion influencer. It came in a fancy silk envelope with a gold-printed card inside, probably more expensive than my rent. Not that it mattered. 3 different relatives had already told me I wasn't really expected to come. "It's nothing personal, Sophia," my Aunt Charla had said carefully over the phone. "Vicki just wants everything to be perfect. You understand, right?" She meant that my plain shoes and simple job as a small-time seamstress didn't fit the stylish image Victoria wanted. It didn't seem to matter that I had been making clothes since we were kids, that I helped her start her first fashion blog, or that I spent hours teaching her about fabric and design. Now that she had 500,000 Instagram followers and a wedding budget bigger than most people's yearly salary, I was forgotten. I set the invitation down on my workbench right next to my sketchbook, where I had been designing ideas for her wedding dress for a year. She hadn't asked me to, but I couldn't help it. I had always designed for her, ever since we were little, playing dress-up in my mom's sewing room. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Charla. "Aunt Charla, Vicki's in a panic. Her designer just quit. Something about creative differences. She's freaking out. Do you know anyone who can help?" I stared at the message, thinking about the email I got 3 months ago. Victoria's famous designer, Alessandro Romano, had actually reached out to me for advice. We had been secretly working together ever since, without Victoria knowing. "The design has no soul," he had written. "Your cousin wants luxury, but she doesn't understand what that really means. You know, fabrics, craftsmanship, help me make something real." So I did. Late at night, after finishing my other sewing work, I sent him sketches. He refined them, added his signature touches, and sent them back. We created something beautiful, a wedding dress that was both elegant and artistic. But last week, things changed. Alessandro's messages became short and frustrated. "Your cousin wants changes that ruin the design. She keeps asking for random details from celebrity dresses, just copying others, with no real vision. I can't do it." I had tried to help, to suggest compromises, but Victoria had always been stubborn, especially when her online image was on the line. Now, I had a choice. I could recommend another designer, someone who would give her exactly what she wanted, a mix of copied styles made for social media attention. Or, I picked up my phone and called. "Ah, my secret collaborator," Alessandro said. "I assume you heard that I quit." "Yes. My aunt just texted me." "This wedding has become a circus," he sighed. "All for show, no real beauty. Like trying to make art with emojis." I took a deep breath. What if we show her our original designs, the ones we created together? There was silence. "Then she'll find out you were involved," he said. "She might not like that. Maybe it's time she remembers who first taught her about real design, before the fame, before she started copying trends." He was quiet for a moment. "The designs we made, they're much better than anything she asked for. But she would have to admit that her plain cousin actually has talent. Sometimes people need to face the truth." "Ha, you're braver than she realizes." I could hear him smiling. "All right, I'll come back, but only if we do this together. You have to be at the consultation tomorrow." My hands shook slightly as I agreed. After hanging up, I gathered my sketchbooks, not just the wedding dress ideas, but all the designs I had ever made for Victoria, back when she cared more about creativity than social media likes. The next morning, I walked into Alessandro's studio in my usual simple outfit, black dress, comfortable flats, no makeup. Victoria was already there, surrounded by her bridesmaids, all looking like they had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. She saw me first. "Sophia, what are you doing here? This is a private meeting." "Your cousin is here because I invited her," Alessandro said, walking in with his usual dramatic flair. "In fact, she is the reason I returned to your wedding project." Vicki frowned. "What are you talking about? You don't even know Sophia." "Oh, then explain this." He pulled out a folder and laid our sketches on the table, months of work, detailed with flowing lines and handwritten notes. Vicki's face went from confused to shocked. Then, horror set in as she recognized my handwriting in the margins. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Sophia doesn't. She can't." "Can't what?" Alessandro asked sharply. "Can't design? Can't understand high fashion?" Look at these sketches, Victoria. Look at the craftsmanship, the way the fabric moves, the balance of tradition and modern style. This is real design. Her hands trembled as she picked up one of the sketches, my personal favorite. But you're just a seamstress, she said to me. You fix hems and mend dresses. I learned to sew before I learned to draw, I said quietly, because you have to understand how something is made before you can design it. You used to believe that too, before Instagram likes mattered more than creativity. One of her bridesmaids leaned over the table. These are amazing, she said. Vicki, this is way better than those copied celebrity dresses. Shut up, Vicki snapped. This is sabotage. You all planned this. First, Alessandro quits, then you bring in my cousin, who wasn't even invited, to embarrass me. No one is against you, Alessandro said. Sophia has been helping me design your dress for months because she knows you. The real you. Not the version you show online. Every choice in these sketches was made with you in mind, not just what's trending. I don't believe you, Vicki said, but her voice shook. Sophia has never designed anything important. I didn't argue. Instead, I pulled out my oldest sketchbook. Inside were the designs we made as kids, diddles of dream dresses with her notes scribbled next to mine. You loved fashion back then, I said softly. Not for the attention, but because you truly loved creating. Remember your prom dress? How we stayed up all night making sure the skirt flowed just right? She stared at the old pages, reaching out to touch them before pulling back. That was different. We were kids. This is my wedding. It has to be perfect. Perfect for who? I asked. Your followers? The magazines? Or you? She didn't answer. Alessandro gathered up our sketches. I'll give you time to think. These designs are full of care and creativity. They could make your wedding truly yours. Or you can hire someone else to copy another bride's dress. Your choice. He turned to me. Come, Sophia. We have other things to discuss. We were almost at the door when Vicki called out. Wait. She hesitated. The blue dress. The one with the cascading panels. Can I see it again? I hid my smile. It was the design. I knew Vicki would choose the dress we dreamed up years ago. But what happened next would change more than just her wedding. It would shake our entire family, because Vicki wasn't the only one about to face the truth about talent, authenticity, and success. After Vicki and her entourage left, Alessandro's studio was silent. I sat at his work table, surrounded by our sketches, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with messages. Aunt Charla, how could you do this to Vicki? She's already stressed. Mom, your aunt is hysterical. What happened at the designer's? 3 cousins. Wait, did you really design Vicki's dress? But it was the last message that made my hands shake. Grandma Rose, the family matriarch. It's time, dear. Bring Alessandro and your portfolios to my house tonight. All of them. I showed Alessandro. He raised an eyebrow. All of them. Does she mean everything? I nodded. The bridal collection, the evening wear, the ready-to-wear sketches. He smirked. Ah, so I'm not the only one keeping secrets. I had never told anyone about the designs I'd been creating for years, filling sketchbooks with ideas for my own fashion brand. Even my clients, who trusted me with their alterations, had no idea. Tonight could change everything, I whispered. Or, Alessandro prompted. Or it could prove what Vicki and everyone else believes, that I'm just a seamstress who got lucky helping a real designer. He scoffed. False modesty doesn't suit you. Bring your work. Let them see what real talent looks like. When we arrived at Grandma Rose's townhouse, it was packed. She had summoned the entire family. Vicki sat with Aunt Charla, both looking irritated. Mom stood by the fireplace, worried but supportive. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the room, whispering. Grandma Rose stood. Sophia, Alessandro sat up in the dining room. Everyone else, patience. I laid out my portfolios on the dining table, years of designs, carefully sketched and detailed. As family members gathered around, there were gasps. These are yours? Cousin Emma whispered, but they look professional. Innovative, Alessandro corrected. Worthy of Paris Fashion Week. Vicki pushed forward. I don't get it. If you could design like this, why have you been working as a seamstress? Grandma Rose answered instead. Because she was learning. Not just fashion, but how clothes work on real bodies, how fabrics move, what people actually need. She picked up a sketch of a convertible dress that adapted to different body types. This isn't just design. It's engineering. It's understanding. Something Instagram can't teach. But Aunt Charlotte started. Enough. Grandma's voice was firm. I've watched this family ignore Sophia's talent for years because it didn't come with a fancy label. You praised Vicki's social media fame but overlooked real artistry. She turned to Alessandro. You saw it, didn't you? The first time she sent you sketches. He nodded. Raw talent, refined by real experience. When Victoria hired me, I was burned out, tired of making copycat designs for celebrities. Then I saw Sophia's work and I remembered why I love fashion. Grandma Rose pulled out a heavy envelope. Sophia, do you know what this is? I shook my head. Your grandfather's final gift to you, Grandma Rose said softly. He knew you needed time to grow your talent without family pressure, so he left you something, only to be given when you were ready. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a deed and bank statements. A small building in the garment district, Grandma explained, and enough money to start your own fashion line. He bought it 20 years ago, back when you first started sketching designs instead of just sewing. He said one day you'd need your own studio. The room erupted into chaos. Aunt Charlotte cried about fairness. My cousins flipped through my portfolio, excited. Mom looked like she might faint. But I was watching Vicki. She stood quietly, her fingers tracing one of my evening wear sketches. This one, she whispered. I remember when you first drew something like it. We were 15, dreaming about the future. You promised to design my wedding dress one day. You remember that? I remember everything, she said, eyes shining. How patient you were teaching me fashion. How you never got angry when I took credit for our designs. How you supported my blog, even when I pretended I'd learned from industry pros instead of you. She looked up. I got lost in the influencer world in what my followers expected. I forgot who I really am, who we were together. The blue dress, I said. The one you loved in Alessandro's studio. It's based on those old sketches. She nodded. I recognize your signature layering. You always made fabric move like water. Alessandro cleared his throat. Perhaps this wedding dress could be a collaboration. The first project of Sophia's new studio with both of you. Vicki hesitated. You'd still work with me, after everything. You're my cousin, I said simply, and under all the filters, you're still the girl who spent hours talking about sleeve construction and hem techniques. What followed was a whirlwind. The building needed work, but with Alessandro's help, we turned it into a real design studio. Vicki's wedding dress became our first official project, this time with full credit to both of us. Her social media documented the whole process, but now it wasn't about likes. It was about real artistry. The dress was everything we once dreamed of, classic yet modern, elegant yet fresh. When Vicki walked down the aisle, people gasped, not just at her beauty, but at the craftsmanship. A week later, Sophia Anderson Designs launched. Our first collection, designed by me, Alessandro, and yes, Vicki, sold out in hours. Turns out, real talent mixed with social media influence is a powerful thing. Not bad for a plain seamstress. But the best part, every tag on our designs carries a small embroidered rose, Grandma's signature flower. Because real legacies aren't about money or fame. They're about honoring the people who taught you to create something real.
On the 42nd floor of a sleek, modern glass office tower in Jersey City, New York, Ezra stood by a vast window. It was December 25th, 4 p.m., and she watched in quiet contemplation as snowflakes gently transformed the bustling financial district into a serene, silver-dusted landscape. Her desk was piled high with investment analysis reports for the fifth quarter, and her office walls were lined with numerous accolades. At 37, Ezra had carved a niche for herself as a distinguished senior analyst at her investment bank. Will everything go smoothly tomorrow? Ezra pondered aloud, her voice tinged with uncertainty, a rare departure from her usual confidence. It had been 12 years since her father's death, a period during which she had thrown herself into her work, achieving a commendable annual income of $290,000 and accumulating substantial savings. Her train of thought was interrupted by a notification on her smartphone. It was from her brother, Daniel, flaunting his latest extravagant purchase on Instagram, a new luxury watch, accompanied by the hashtag luxurious living. Ezra's frown deepened. Daniel had been recklessly spending their father's inheritance, seemingly oblivious to its finite nature. His wife, Amelia, was no different, regularly posting about her latest high-end fashion acquisitions. The previous night, Ezra had received a financially motivated call from her mother, Madeline, who lived a lavish lifestyle in Miami with Ezra's stepfather, John. "Ezra, listen," her mother had begun, her voice sharp. "Daniel wants to buy a new car and needs a down payment." Resigned, Ezra had agreed to help, as she had many times before, supporting her family's opulent spending habits. From her desk drawer, Ezra retrieved a photograph of her last Christmas with her father, taken in the hospital. Despite his frailty, his smile radiated warmth. "Dad, I'm trying hard," she whispered to the photo, then turned her attention to a reservation confirmation beside it. She had booked 35 suites at the upscale Skytop Lodge in the Snowmass Village for $1,000 a night over the Christmas period, a total cost of about $15,000. This expenditure was significant, even on her salary. This holiday was more than a mere getaway. It was Ezra's last-ditch effort to repair familial bonds. By shouldering all expenses and dedicating time to her family, she hoped to foster change. The office phone rang, a call from Skytop Lodge to finalize arrangements for her stay starting the next day. Ezra straightened, slipping back into her professional demeanor. "Yes, this is Ezra. Regarding tomorrow's arrangements." As she continued the conversation, Ezra's gaze drifted back to the wintry scene outside. The room held an air of mixed feelings, anticipation mingled with anxiety. On her bed, a Louis Vuitton suitcase lay half-packed, and a dark green cashmere sweater, set aside for the next day, lay neatly folded. While it wasn't a $22,000 sweater, its high-quality material and understated design mirrored Ezra's personal tastes and life philosophy. She pondered, is this the right outfit? As she prepared for what she hoped would be a turning point. Holding a dark green sweater close to her chest, Ezra stood in front of the mirror reflecting on her family's taste for luxury. Her sister-in-law, Amelia, always sported the latest designer brands, and her mother had developed a penchant for flashy attire to complement her husband John's opulent preferences. Amid these thoughts, the phone rang, and on the other end was Gabriel, his voice always kind but today tinged with concern. "Is everything on track?" he asked. "Yes, mostly," Ezra replied, her voice revealing her fatigue. She had already provided the staff at Skytop Lodge, Gabriel's luxurious resort and one of many in his renowned hotel chain, with special instructions to call her immediately if any issues arose. Gabriel, whom she had met 3 years prior at an investors' conference, had since become a reliable ally and friend in her endeavors. "Thank you, Gabriel. I think it'll be okay. I believe this trip will make a difference," she said optimistically as she moved toward the window, ending the call to enjoy a moment of solitude. Settling onto her living room sofa, Ezra's gaze fell upon a photograph on the coffee table, capturing the last moment with her father 12 years earlier. In the sterile white of a hospital room, her frail father had held her hand tightly and entrusted her with the care of their family. Inspired by his belief in her, Ezra had pursued her education with vigor, graduated with top honors, and climbed the financial career ladder to become a senior analyst at a prestigious investment bank, all by her early 30s. In stark contrast, her brother Daniel had left college after their father's death and, under the indulgence of his stepfather, continued to drain the family inheritance. Together with Amelia, they enjoyed a life of luxury without contribution. Her smartphone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "You're picking me up tomorrow morning, right? Don't oversleep." His usual arrogance seeped through even in text. Ezra replied succinctly, "Of course," despite her reservations about using her own car. Daniel usually preferred premium taxi services and rarely drove. Glancing at the clock, which showed it was past 11 p.m., she realized the early morning ahead required her to finalize her packing. The anticipation of the day caused a slight quickening of her heartbeat. She looked at her father's photograph one last time, finding encouragement in his smile. "Tomorrow will surely go well," she whispered to herself as she headed to her bedroom, though she suspected it might be a long while before sleep claimed her, given the mix of anticipation and anxiety for the day ahead. Christmas Eve morning dawned with Jersey City blanketed in a silvery snowscape. The clock read 7 a.m., and Ezra woke up half an hour earlier than planned, a welcome head start. She inhaled deeply, mentally preparing herself for the day. "Today's the day," she murmured as she got out of bed. In her bathroom, Ezra applied her makeup meticulously. Around her neck, she clasped a single diamond necklace, a cherished keepsake from her father, adding a touch of elegance to her simple yet refined attire. She was ready to face whatever the day might bring, armed with the resilience and resolve her father had instilled in her. Ezra's simple yet refined attire mirrored her persona perfectly, confident from over 28 years of experience and quietly anxious about the day ahead. In her luxury apartment building's underground garage, which was unusually quiet this Christmas Eve morning, her black Mercedes-Benz gleamed under the artificial lights. As she started the engine, the car's navigation system lit up, outlining her route for the day. Her first stop was the upscale apartment on the Upper East Side where her mother, Madeline, and stepfather, John, resided. Afterward, she would head to the newly purchased home of her brother Daniel and his wife Amelia in Queens. The city roads, clear but slippery with snow, required cautious driving. Upon reaching the Upper East Side, Madeline was already outside, unmistakable in a flamboyant red coat and clutching a large Gucci bag. John silently slid into the back seat without a greeting. "Good morning, Ezra." Madeline's voice chimed with a tone that felt more suited to addressing a chauffeur than her daughter. Next, they proceeded to Daniel and Amelia's place in Queens. The couple had moved to an affluent neighborhood despite whispers of their dwindling inheritance. "Ezra, you're late," Daniel greeted her with his characteristic arrogance. Amelia, matching her husband's pomp, sported a brand new Gucci coat and bag, looking as though she had just stepped out of a luxury fashion advert. With the car full, Ezra carefully maneuvered out of Queens. Daniel occupied the passenger seat, engrossed in his smartphone, likely crafting another boastful social media update. The car's atmosphere was tense. Whispered exchanges between Madeline and Amelia were the only breaks in an otherwise stifling silence. The drive to their destination took about 3 hours, during which the snow-covered peaks of the mountains gradually came into view, their serene beauty slightly easing Ezra's tension. "There, you can see it now," Daniel suddenly declared as the grandiose structure of Skytop Lodge appeared amidst the snowy landscape. The lodge, an architectural gem styled after the Italian Renaissance, blended beautifully with the wintry surroundings. A giant, ornately decorated Christmas tree graced the front entrance, and festive illuminations sparkled vibrantly. As luxury cars streamed in and affluent families alighted, Ezra pulled up to the entrance. A uniformed bellboy approached as she parked, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Daniel's voice, devoid of warmth and unusually icy, cut through the silence. "You've worked hard to get us here," he said as he smirked maliciously, a look Ezra had never seen on him before. Madeline and John quickly averted their eyes, while Amelia offered a sly, small smile. Ezra turned to face the back seat, her intuition screaming that something was terribly wrong. Daniel's chilling words hung in the air, suggesting an unsettling turn of events. "The driver's job ends here. This hotel is for us," he declared, indicating a plan Ezra had not been privy to. The sense of betrayal was palpable as she realized this holiday gathering might not be the family reunion she had hoped for. In the chilling interior of the car, Daniel's declaration that the real family only belonged here left Ezra stunned. The atmosphere seemed to drop in temperature, reflecting the sudden coldness of her brother's betrayal. "What do you mean?" Ezra asked, her voice quivering slightly despite her effort to remain composed. "I made the reservations." "Oh, the reservations," Daniel sneered with a dismissive air. "They've already been changed to just our names." Her mother, Madeline, appeared troubled yet remained silent, while her stepfather, John, continued to gaze out the window, indifferent. Amelia couldn't conceal her malicious grin, relishing the unfolding drama. One by one, everyone except Ezra exited the car, leaving her isolated as Daniel directed the bellboy to handle their luggage. With shaking hands that she fought to control, Ezra pulled out her smartphone and dialed Gabriel, the owner of the lodge. After a few rings, his calm voice greeted her. "Hello, Ezra." "Gabriel, cancel the reservations," Ezra stated, her voice surprisingly steady. "All of them, please." There was a brief pause on the line before Gabriel, understanding the gravity of her request, replied, "Understood. I'll arrange it right away." As this conversation took place, a staff member in a stark black uniform approached from the front desk, his figure contrasted sharply against the white snow. From inside the car, Ezra watched as the lodge employee informed her family that they could not find their reservation. Daniel's confident smirk disappeared, replaced by confusion. Madeline began frantically searching through her purse, while John finally turned to face the front, the reality of the situation dawning on him. "There must be some mistake," Madeline muttered anxiously. Ezra slowly rolled down her window, her calm demeanor belying the turmoil she felt inside. "It's no mistake," she said clearly. "All reservations have been canceled."
Goodbye.
"Wait, Ezra," Daniel called out desperately, his voice laced with panic. "It's just a joke, you know that, right?" But Ezra had already started the engine and gripped the steering wheel firmly. Through the rearview mirror, she saw her family standing bewildered in the snow, Amelia's expensive boots sinking deeper into the white powder. As Ezra drove away, Madeline's voice faded into the wind, calling out her name in vain. The car exited the hotel parking lot, retracing its path as the snow continued to fall gently. A single tear rolled down Ezra's cheek, not so much from sorrow but from a profound sense of liberation. Her smartphone began to ring with Daniel calling, followed by a call from Madeline, both of which she ignored. Messages started flooding in one after another, filled with questions and accusations. "Why would you do this? It's Christmas Eve. You've embarrassed us. Will you refund the accommodation costs?" Ezra let out a small, incredulous laugh at the last message. In the end, it was clear their interests lay in money, not in love or familial bonds, just calculations and pretenses. As she drove down the mountain heading back towards the city, Ezra felt a weight lifting off her shoulders, her resolve strengthening with each mile. She was finally free from the expectations and manipulations of those who were supposed to be her closest kin. Choosing not to return to her apartment, Ezra instead directed her car towards Gabriel's penthouse. There was a refreshing clarity in her gaze reflected in the rearview mirror, while the streetlights gently painted the falling snow with a peaceful glow, enhancing the festive ambience of the evening. The silence within her car, now devoid of the usual familial passengers, felt surprisingly soothing. 3 hours later, she glided her car into the underground parking of Gabriel's luxurious building. A warm feeling spread through her chest as she stepped into the elevator. She was certain she was headed in the right direction. Upon opening the door to the penthouse, she was welcomed by the warmth of the room and the comforting presence of Gabriel. The fireplace was already aglow, casting a soft light throughout the living room. "Are you okay?" Gabriel inquired with genuine concern as he noticed her arrival. "Yes," Ezra responded, managing a smile. "Actually, I feel relieved." She settled into the cozy atmosphere as Gabriel prepared 4 glasses of wine, listening intently as she recounted the evening's events, the unsettling smirk of her brother Daniel, the evasive eyes of her mother Madeline, and her decisive actions. "Ezra, you made the right choice," Gabriel reassured her from a spot by the fireplace. "But I ruined their Christmas," Ezra murmured, her eyes on the wine glass in her hand. "That's not true," Gabriel replied, his voice both gentle and firm. "They ruined their own Christmas. You just protected your worth." Tears welled up in Ezra's eyes, but they were not of sorrow. Instead, they signified relief from the burden she had carried for years. Her smartphone vibrated once more, this time with a message from her stepfather John. "Because of your selfishness, you've embarrassed the entire family." Don't ever show your face again. With a resolute flick, Ezra turned off her smartphone completely, severing the last digital tether to her family. Gabriel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, providing a warmth she had never felt from her family. From tomorrow, a new life begins, Ezra declared, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the fireplace. I won't let anyone interfere with my life anymore. Gabriel nodded silently, acknowledging her resolve. For Ezra, this was the most meaningful Christmas Eve ever. Not because she had lost her family, but because she had reclaimed her true self. The keepsake necklace from her father softly glittered in the light of the fireplace, a symbol of her enduring strength. As Christmas morning dawned, Jersey City was cloaked in a pristine silvery white. The view from the windows of Gabriel's penthouse resembled a picturesque postcard, with snow gently falling between the high-rises, softly erasing the traces of the previous day. "Good morning, honey," Gabriel greeted her, already busying himself with making coffee. The rich aroma of espresso filled the room, heralding the start of a new chapter in Ezra's life. Ezra had received a call from Gabriel that morning. In his soft-spoken manner, he mentioned, "I got a call from Skytop Lodge. Your family caused quite a stir there." Standing by the window, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands, Ezra responded with a calmness that belied the turmoil from the night before. "I expected as much. Daniel probably stirred up trouble." Reluctantly, she powered on her smartphone, which was immediately bombarded with over 50 missed calls and nearly 280 messages. Most were from her mother, Madeline, and her brother, Daniel, with a few interspersed from John. The messages were filled with accusations and demands. "Ezra, do you think this is acceptable? You've made us a laughingstock in the lobby of a luxury hotel, and I'll never forget it. How dare you treat us this way? What about tonight?" The last message from her mother pressed for a discussion about money. "We need to talk about money. Call me immediately." With a deep sigh, Ezra set the phone down. Gabriel came up behind her, enveloping her in a comforting hug. His presence brought a reassuring warmth. "I've made up my mind," Ezra declared, her voice resolute as she turned to meet Gabriel's gaze directly. "I'm cutting off all ties with them." Gabriel's expression showed support, though he asked gently, "Are you sure about this? After all, they're your family." "No, they aren't," Ezra replied firmly. "A real family understands and supports each other. They were just strangers obsessed with money." The two moved to the breakfast table where Gabriel had prepared a simple but heartfelt meal of croissants and scrambled eggs. This, Ezra realized, was the true happiness she had been seeking. "I have a proposal for you," Gabriel said, his eyes earnest. "Why don't we live together?" The suggestion, coming as gentle snowflakes dusted the world outside the window, left Ezra momentarily speechless. "Let's start a new life here together," he added, his words bringing tears of joy to her eyes, tears for the freedom from false familial burdens and the beginning of a new, true family. "Yes," Ezra smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. "That sounds wonderful, Gabriel." Just then, her smartphone rang again. The screen displayed "Mom," but Ezra no longer hesitated. She picked up the phone and methodically blocked her mother's number, followed by those of Daniel and John. "I've taken a new step," she said, her expression clear and bright. Gabriel smiled warmly in response. In mid-January, a severe cold wave swept through Jersey City. From her office window, the cityscape seemed to shiver under the icy north wind. "Ms. Ezra, there's a visitor for you in the lobby," her secretary's voice announced through the intercom. "Mrs. Madeline Brown is here." Ezra's hands paused above the keyboard. It was the first time she'd heard her mother's name since that fateful Christmas Eve. "Understood. I'll be right there," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. As she walked to the high-rise building's first-floor lobby, the echo of her high heels on the marble floor matched the steady beat of her heart. She braced herself for the reunion, curious and cautious about the state in which she would find her mother, who was seated on the visitor's sofa, noticeably absent from her usual flashy attire. Wearing a simple gray coat and subdued makeup that highlighted her fatigue, Ezra's mother appeared markedly less imposing than she had in the past. Her voice, stripped of its former arrogance, barely carried as she asked, "May I come in?" Ezra nodded silently, leading her mother to the elevator without a word. Once in the office, Ezra motioned for her mother to take a seat on the sofa in the reception area. Outside, light snowflakes began to whirl in the chilly air, painting a serene yet somber scene. "I came here because I needed to talk," her mother started, her voice low, sitting across from Ezra with a cup of coffee between them. "We've reached our limit." The news was exactly what Ezra had anticipated. The lavish lifestyle funded by her father's dwindling inheritance had finally caught up with them. Her stepfather's real estate investments had flopped, plunging them into debt. Daniel was struggling to keep up with payments for his new car and was behind on rent. "We need help," her mother's voice quivered. "Mom, is this about money?" Ezra asked, her tone calm yet firm. "Yes," her mother admitted hesitantly, outlining the need for monthly living expenses and Daniel's car loan. "Mom, that's enough." Ezra cut her off. "I'm no longer the family bank. I've chosen to live my own life." Her mother's face fell, a stark contrast to the clear resolve shining in Ezra's eyes. "But we're family." "What does real family mean anyway?" her mother pleaded. Ezra asked quietly, reflecting on past hurts. "During Christmas, you all treated me like a chauffeur. You said nothing when Daniel gave me that spiteful smile. Is that family?" The room fell into a heavy silence. "Listen, Ezra," her mother, Madeline, began tearfully. "I truly regret what happened that day, but right now, I'm really in trouble. I need your help." Ezra slowly stood and walked to the window, her gaze settling on the view. In the distance, she could see the building her father once managed, a symbol of her past. Without turning around, she said, "Mom, go home. And don't come back again. My life is mine now."
"Goodbye, Mom."
Her mother lingered, seemingly wanting to say more, but ultimately, she stood and left in silence, the sound of the closing door echoing through the room. Ezra sighed deeply as she returned to her desk, feeling the weight of the finality of her decision. She stared out at the snow, now settling quietly on the city, covering the scars of yesterday, allowing her a moment of peace as she contemplated her new, independent path forward. As Ezra fingered her father's keepsake necklace, a weight inside her chest seemed to lift slightly. It was spring now, and the view from Gabriel's penthouse revealed a Jersey City transformed. The park below was a vibrant tapestry of blossoming trees, bursting with color. Holding her morning coffee, Ezra stood by the window, soaking in the scene. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel's voice came from behind her, soft and curious. "Just a lot of things," Ezra replied, turning to give him a warm smile. "In these 5 months, my life has changed so much." Indeed, the changes had been profound. She had announced her engagement to Gabriel, and her career had taken a significant leap forward. She was now the head of her department at the investment bank, leading a new project team where her skills were fully recognized and appreciated. Contact with her mother and Daniel had ceased, and Daniel's typically ostentatious social media presence had vanished. She later learned through a colleague that they had downscaled from their luxury apartment to a more modest one, adopting a simpler lifestyle. "Any regrets?" Gabriel asked as he joined her by the window, his gaze also drawn to the cherry blossoms outside. "None at all. This is the path I've chosen," Ezra responded firmly, once again touching the necklace, a symbol of her father's enduring influence and her new direction. She mused to herself that true family isn't necessarily defined by blood relations. It's about understanding and supporting each other. That evening, at a chic restaurant where she and Gabriel had first met, he had more good news. "We're going to expand with a new hotel chain on the West Coast," Gabriel shared enthusiastically, his eyes shining with the prospect. "And I want you involved as an investment advisor." Ezra nodded without hesitation. Her work and personal life were harmonizing into a perfect balance. She felt a profound sense of a new beginning brewing for them both. "To our lives," Ezra raised her glass, toasting to their future together. "Our lives," Gabriel echoed, clinking his glass against hers. The sound seemed to chime like the opening notes of a new chapter. The evening buzzed with potential, reflecting the perfect alignment of their personal and professional dreams, setting the stage for a future filled with shared successes and mutual support. I bought a house that unexpectedly ended up in my sister's name, leaving me in a state of shock. At 29, I'm repaying a mortgage for a house I originally purchased from my parents. They later transferred ownership to my sister as a gift, a fact they never shared with me. It's startling to see the lengths they went for my 27-year-old sister. I always felt my parents favored her, but the extent of it only became clear with this revelation. Growing up, I sensed a stark difference in how we were treated. While I was groomed for responsibility from a young age, my sister Tiffany was coddled and allowed the freedom to explore her interests without any academic pressure. My parents heavily invested in my education, pushing me to excel and build a solid career right after high school. Instead of letting me use my savings or take out a student loan, which they argued was too costly due to high interest rates, they chose to go into debt themselves. At the time, I thought they were shielding me from financial burdens. Once I graduated and landed a stable tech job, I felt the weight of their expectations to succeed as a return on their investment. They often reminded me of their sacrifices, which initially seemed like a way to keep me grounded. However, over time, it became apparent that this was a form of emotional manipulation, leveraging guilt to influence my decisions. The pressure intensified when I started my career. Visits home were filled with relentless inquiries about my progress and reminders of the financial sacrifices they made for my education. Barely a year into my job, during a holiday dinner, my father made it clear they expected me to buy them a house, as they could no longer afford to live on rent after spending their savings on my education. This demand, following so closely on the heels of their financial support for my studies, was overwhelming and made me deeply uneasy about my obligations towards them. This complex dynamic has left me grappling with feelings of betrayal and manipulation, while also wrestling with familial responsibilities and my sense of independence. I never imagined I'd be buying a house so early into my career. Just 1 year into my first job, still sharing an apartment with 3 roommates, the idea of owning a home seemed way out of reach. Despite my financial limitations and the reservations of banks, my parents insisted I buy a house. "Dad, I've barely started working. I can't even afford my own place," I protested. My father, with a determined look, responded, "We raised you to set goals and work towards them." My mother added in a calm but stern voice, "Without our help, you wouldn't have gone to college or become who you are today. It's time you repaid that debt." Although I felt overwhelmed, I couldn't find the courage to argue against their perspective. I knew I owed a lot to their sacrifices, but sometimes their expectations felt suffocating. I wanted to shout, "Who asked you to sacrifice so much?" But I held back, choosing instead to slowly withdraw from them. I began to only respond to emergency calls and stopped visiting home, using my busy job schedule as an excuse to keep my distance. Despite this, the idea of fulfilling their wish for a house never left my mind. After 6 years of diligent saving and working extra hours, I finally purchased a house for them. It was a cozy, modest home in a peaceful neighborhood, not luxurious, but comfortable. I thought fulfilling this obligation would at least bring some peace. I continued paying the mortgage for 5 years, making extra payments, when possible, to prevent foreclosure, even though I had other dreams like owning my personal space, traveling, and starting a family. The nagging from my parents ceased once the house was secured. They boasted to friends and relatives about their successful investment in my education. Though I didn't engage much with them, the emotional distance remained. After months of intense work, I decided to visit them, hoping to bridge the gap. As I arrived, I noticed my sister Tiffany's car in the driveway. Excited at the prospect of a family reunion, I approached the house. Tiffany, now married and living elsewhere, hadn't been around much. Last I knew, My parents were still renting the old place. When I knocked, Tiffany, dressed in pajamas, greeted me. Surprised, I joked, "What are you doing here?" As I entered, I asked about our parents. Lounging on the couch, she nonchalantly said, "Oh, they moved out." Confused, I pressed for more details. "Moved out? What do you mean? This is their house." Tiffany shrugged. "I guess they didn't tell you. They gave me the house. I live here now." Her words made my heart sink, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. The realization that the house I had worked so hard to buy and maintain for my parents was now in my sister's name was both shocking and disheartening. It was a betrayal that reshaped my understanding of my family dynamics and my place within them. All this time, Tiffany mentioned it so nonchalantly, as if it wasn't a big deal. "Mom and Dad said I needed the house more than you, what with a baby on the way and all." It turned out that my parents had decided she should have the house. Shocked, I pressed for details on where our parents were now. Tiffany's casual reply was that they were renting an apartment across town. Overwhelmed with a mix of emotions, I left without another word and drove straight to their new place. When my mother opened the door, I couldn't hold back. "What is going on? Tiffany told me you gave her the house I've been paying for. Explain yourselves." My mother, with an unsettling calmness, gestured for me to come inside. "Calm down, let's talk inside. I didn't think you'd care this much." Once inside, I barely crossed the threshold before I demanded answers. "Why would you give away the house I bought for you without even talking to me about it? Didn't you think I deserved to know?" My mother exhaled, her patience thinning. "We've been thinking about this for a while. You're successful. You don't need to worry. Do you want Tiffany's kids to grow up in an unstable home? With her own house, she won't have to stress over rent and can focus on raising her family." Her words ignited a fury in me. "I don't care where my niece or nephew grows up. We managed just fine in rental homes ourselves. It's not my job to secure Tiffany's financial stability. That's on her and her husband. If they need stability, they should work towards it, not depend on handouts." Hearing the heated exchange, my father joined in, his tone defensive. "Why are you making such a fuss? Tiffany needs stability. We couldn't give her the same opportunities we gave you. We didn't pay for her college, so she deserves the house." I was dumbfounded. That's ridiculous. She didn't go to college because she dropped out of high school. Why should I pay the price for her choices? They didn't seem to grasp the impact of their decisions. "You're already successful. You can just buy something else," they argued. "Sure, I could buy another house, but isn't that for me to decide? Not you to dictate." Their casual dismissal of my feelings and efforts left me reeling as if the world had flipped upside down. Their reasoning baffled me, and with nothing left to say, I stormed out of their apartment. In need of space and time to think, I checked into a hotel to collect my thoughts and cool down from the whirlwind of family drama. Since that shocking revelation last Friday, I've been struggling with how to proceed. It's now Sunday, and I'm supposed to fly back home on Tuesday. I was close to leaving right after discovering the truth, but after calming down, I realized there were more things I needed to sort out first. I'm particularly concerned about the mortgage balance. Given that I had been making extra payments, I suspect it might be closer to being paid off than originally expected. Before visiting my parents, I texted my father to ask about the outstanding mortgage amount. He said he would check with a loan manager. In response, I insisted, "Take me to the bank tomorrow. I need to verify the outstanding balance myself." While I no longer want to continue paying the mortgage, I need a clear understanding of the situation. The thought of continuing payments for a house that's no longer legally mine seems unjust, especially considering how my parents and sister have seemingly taken my efforts for granted. I went to the bank and faced an even harsher reality. The extra payments I made were never credited towards the mortgage. Instead, my father had been using that money to cover their apartment rent. This discovery was devastating. I had been living frugally, saving aggressively to pay off the mortgage early, and now it appeared my sacrifices were for nothing. The bank manager showed me the monthly deposit records, confirming that I had indeed been paying approximately 2.1 times the required mortgage amount. When I pointed this out, My father initially seemed confused, but eventually admitted that the records were accurate. "The records are correct. You were right," he said, seemingly overwhelmed. "We'll talk more later." This unexpected betrayal left me reeling. I sat quietly as the bank manager explained the remaining mortgage details and options for consolidating the loan. As soon as we were alone, my father pulled me aside and, to my astonishment, asked, "Why did you bring up the extra payments? Were those meant for the mortgage?" Raising my voice, I replied, "Yes, of course. Why else would I send extra money?" His next words left me stunned. "I thought it was for our expenses." This mix-up, or perhaps deliberate misunderstanding, compounded the betrayal and left me grappling with the depth of my family's deception and my financial entanglements. The situation demanded a serious reconsideration of my relationship with my family and how I would handle financial dealings with them in the future. As my father confessed to using the extra money I sent for the mortgage to pay their rent instead, I felt my world spin. Overwhelmed and betrayed, I sank into the nearest chair, my face buried in my hands. How could I even look at my parents now? My father tried to downplay the situation, sitting beside me and saying, "It's not that big of a deal." I couldn't contain my anger. "Not that big of a deal? You pressured me into buying a house, handed it over to Tiffany without telling me, and then used my money, intended for the mortgage, to cover your rent. And that's not a big deal?" He responded defensively, "Look, the house didn't benefit you, but remember I spent all my savings on your college. A little payback isn't too much to ask. Besides, I made the mortgage payments on time. What's the problem with using the extra for rent? I'm not asking you for more money." His attempt to justify his actions only fueled my anger. The extra money was for early repayment of the mortgage, not for your living expenses. I left the bank, my mind racing with betrayal and disbelief. As I walked away, my father called after me, but I didn't turn back, heading straight for the subway station instead. My phone buzzed continuously with calls and texts from my mother pleading, "Come home so we can discuss this." I didn't respond. The thought of sitting down and hashing it out became unbearable. I needed to take a stand against what I saw as sheer foolishness. Shocked and hurt by my father's manipulative justifications, I realized I had every right to be angry and to set firm boundaries. My generosity had been exploited, and choosing to ignore their calls and messages felt completely justified. It was time to prioritize my well-being. Trembling with anger, I returned to my home, determined to return to normalcy. As the new month rolled in, I broke from routine and did not send the mortgage payment. I had decided it was time for Tiffany to assume responsibility for the mortgage if our parents intended for her to have the house. She and my parents needed to handle their financial decisions without dragging me into it. My father tried to reach out but found himself blocked, as I had also blocked my mother, Tiffany, and her husband. In search of peace, I made the firm decision to stop paying the mortgage and to distance myself from their manipulations. When my parents realized the payments had ceased, they became furious. I received numerous calls and voicemails from unknown numbers, likely friends they roped into trying to contact me. Despite the barrage of attempts to reach me, I stood firm, no longer willing to let their decisions and manipulations control my life or my finances. It was time they understood the consequences of their actions and the importance of respecting my autonomy. Despite my parents' urgent cries that they couldn't afford the mortgage if I stopped paying, I silently laughed. This had become no longer my problem. I blocked all the new numbers they tried to reach me with, but the saga didn't end there. 5 days later, I returned from work to find my father waiting at my doorstep, visibly furious. "This can't end like this. You owe us. We're the ones who sent you to college, who made you who you are today," he exclaimed. I countered, exasperated. "I've already paid more than enough. Do you even realize how much I've contributed to the mortgage? It's far more than what you spent on my college tuition. I owe you nothing." My father branded me as ungrateful, but I wouldn't let him guilt-trip me any further. "Stop it," I interrupted. "I'm done paying for your rent or any other expenses. That's your responsibility, not mine. I can't do this anymore. You raised me as an investment looking to cash out for life. I am not just some asset you can exploit. With those final words, I left him at my doorstep, got into my car, and drove away. I avoided going back to my apartment immediately, fearful he might follow. I didn't need any more confrontations. When I eventually returned later that night, he was gone. In the days that followed, my phone was flooded with calls and messages. My mother left frantic voicemails, and Tiffany sent a lengthy message trying to explain why the house was crucial for her family. She called me selfish for not supporting them, but I felt a profound sense of liberation from their manipulative grasp. My relationship with them had effectively ended. The financial strains soon caught up with them. Tiffany struggled to make the mortgage payments, and my parents couldn't manage their apartment rent without my support. I had anticipated this outcome. It was just a matter of time until they would face the reality of their situation. About a year later, I heard that the house was put up for sale. My parents tried to salvage it using what little they had saved and their retirement funds, but their efforts fell short. Tensions escalated when my parents asked Tiffany and her husband to contribute to half of the mortgage costs, citing the financial burden. Tiffany, maintaining that the house was a gift, insisted they should bear the full cost. That's when my parents finally realized the gravity of their mistake. The situation unraveled, revealing the unsustainable nature of their expectations and the broken promises that led us to this point. The familial bonds had been strained past the point of repair, leaving everyone to reckon with the consequences of their actions and decisions. With the house finally put up for auction and subsequently sold, my father managed to recover a notable sum from the sale. This outcome, though bittersweet, was undoubtedly for the best. Reflecting on the financial contributions I made over the years, including the down payment and mortgage payments, I've come to terms with the reality that I won't be seeing that money again. They have no intention of reimbursing me, and accepting this has been a crucial step in moving forward. Now, there's no longer any facade of generosity or pretense of benefaction from their side. I've reconciled the fact that I have repaid, in full, the cost of my college education to my parents, even including the interest they might have incurred. This closure has freed me from any guilt associated with cutting ties with them. Family or not, the financial and emotional ledger is balanced. From what I've heard from relatives and my uncle, my parents have downsized significantly, moving into a smaller apartment to cut costs. They've begun to wisely manage the proceeds from the house auction, focusing earnestly on preparing for their retirement without the expectation of further financial support from me. This marks a significant shift in their approach to financial independence. Additionally, their relationship with my sister Tiffany has undergone a stark transformation. They have cut off any financial aid to her, demanding that she step up to take responsibility for her own family's needs. Despite Tiffany's attempts to leverage guilt as a means to sway them, my parents have stood their ground. This firm stance is a new and healthier dynamic for them, marking a pivotal change in our family's narrative. On a personal note, my journey has led me to secure my apartment, a space that represents my independence and a fresh start. I've started to save diligently for a home that will be entirely mine, a sanctuary untainted by familial disputes or obligations. The process of distancing myself from my family was fraught with difficulty and emotional turmoil, but it was a necessary step to protect my well-being and autonomy. The realization that sometimes those closest to you can exploit your kindness was a hard lesson to learn. It has been a significant and painful chapter of my life, but it has also been one of growth and self-realization. I have no regrets about the decisions I've made. My stance is clear. I deserve respect and fair treatment, whether from family or strangers. The breakdown of my family's previously manipulative dynamics, while sad, is a testament to the natural consequences of their actions over the years. Today, as I hear about their adjustments and the shifts in their lives, there's a part of me that feels saddened by the disintegration of what was once my family. Yet, there's also a sense of relief and vindication. They are finally facing the reality of their choices, and I am free from the chains of guilt and obligation that once bound me. This newfound freedom has been liberating, allowing me to focus on building a future that honors my values and respects my contributions, not just financially, but in all aspects of life. I hadn't planned on sharing my story, but sometimes life's twists and turns are so profound that they leave you no choice but to voice them, just to piece together your understanding. I'm Emma, and by 36, my life had been a roller coaster of highs and lows I never anticipated. The familiar world around me had shattered, compelling me to sift through the fragments and ponder where things had veered so drastically off course. Let me take you back to where it all began. Just over a year ago, I completed my divorce proceedings with Liam, my ex-husband. Contrary to what one might expect, we remained amicable. Liam, who was still quite affluent, ensured I was well taken care of in our separation. He left me our spacious suburban home, where I reside with our son, Mason, and an apartment downtown that generates consistent rental income. The house, with its vast backyard, is Mason's playground, and the apartment's central location guarantees it's always in demand. "Mommy, when will Daddy visit?" Mason would often inquire, his large blue eyes brimming with hope. At 7 years old, despite the split, Liam was a steadfast figure in his life. "This weekend, sweetheart. Remember, he promised to take you to the park." I would remind him, thankful that at least this aspect of our fractured family remained intact. Liam was punctual, arriving every Saturday at 8 a.m. in his sleek car. "You're doing a great job with him, Emma," Liam complimented one day after a visit. "I know it's tough, but you're managing wonderfully." My family background was a bit more tangled. My parents split when I was just 3, and my mother quickly remarried, introducing a new man into our home who suddenly declared himself my father. A year later, my half-sister Grace was born. Growing up, Grace and I maintained a cordial but distant relationship, shaped by different fathers, contrasting personalities, and separate paths. "Why don't you and Aunt Grace hang out like other sisters?" Mason innocently questioned one evening at dinner, his fork reluctantly spearing peas. I hesitated, then responded, "Sometimes sisters are just different, honey, and that's okay. It's like how you don't want to play with every kid in your class." But Mason was observant. "But she never comes to my birthday parties," he observed, finally munching on some peas. "Aunt Grace is very busy with her own life," I explained, though the reality was more nuanced. Grace seemed to harbor a deep-seated resentment towards our family dynamics, exacerbated when my father continued to financially support me through college while her father struggled. If only I had recognized earlier the warning signs, the subtle eye rolls when I mentioned a new purchase, the backhanded compliments about my fortunate marriage, the sudden excuses to be busy. Reflecting on these moments, I now see the cracks that would eventually lead to our family's unraveling. Whenever I invited Grace to our family gatherings, my friend Abigail would often say, "Your sister's just jealous. Some people can't stand seeing others happy." I usually dismiss such comments, believing that family ties would eventually heal and bring us closer. How wrong I was. Everything shifted when my grandmother, my father's mother, passed away. She had lived a modest life in a quaint house on the outskirts of town, complete with geraniums overflowing from window boxes and a screen door that creaked just as it had for decades. The funeral was a humble yet dignified affair, exactly as she would have wanted. To my surprise, she left everything to me in her will, the house and a sum of money I didn't even know she possessed. "Your grandmother always had a special place in her heart for you," my father told me at the funeral, his eyes wet with emotion. "She loved how you visited her every Sunday with Mason, even after your divorce. She always said, 'That girl has a good heart, just like her daddy.' I just wish Mason could have spent more time with her," I responded, watching my son lay a bouquet of daisies he had picked from our garden on her grave. "Mommy, is great-grandma in heaven now?" Mason asked, his small hand finding mine. "Yes, sweetheart, and I bet she's up there baking her famous chocolate chip cookies," I assured him. I was still coming to terms with this unexpected inheritance when my parents summoned me for what they termed an important family discussion. As soon as I entered their home, the tension was palpable. The aroma of my mother's signature pot roast filled the air, but it was overshadowed by a palpable sense of confrontation. My mother seated me at the kitchen table, where countless family dinners had taken place. The table still bore the marks of Grace's teenage years, a lasting record of our family's past. "Would you like some coffee?" my mother asked, pouring before I could answer, handing me my favorite mug. "We need to talk about your grandmother's house," she began in a tone that made me instantly wary. "What about it?" I asked, feeling defensive as I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. My stepfather leaned forward, the chair creaking under his weight. "You have to admit, you've got quite a bit of property now. The house from Liam, the rental apartment, and now this," he said, his tone heavy with implication. My mother nodded, tapping her manicured nails against her cup in a way that made my teeth set on edge. "Grace has been struggling, you know," she continued, her voice smooth and persuasive. "She's been renting that tiny apartment for years, and it's barely bigger than a shoebox. Really, it was more akin to a closet, and considering Grace's modest salary from her city administration job, you can imagine how tight things were for her." As I sat there, steam curling from my untouched coffee, my parents made their proposal. "Wouldn't it be fair if you gave her grandmother's house?" my mother suggested, reaching over to pat my hand gently. "After all, you've been so fortunate, Emma and Grace. She's had a rough time," she added. My stepfather gave me what he must have thought was a convincing smile. "It's not like it's a particularly valuable property. You wouldn't really be losing much, and think how much it would mean to your sister." I was taken aback by their boldness, but also felt a familiar pang of guilt. It was true, I did have more than Grace, and the house wasn't worth much. Their expectations felt like a heavy cloak draped over my shoulders. "Have you discussed this with Grace?" I asked, already suspecting the answer from their hesitant glances. "We wanted to talk to you first," my mother replied swiftly, her voice a little too casual. "But she's been going through a lot, you know. She recently broke up with her boyfriend, the one from the bank." I was startled to realize how little I knew about my sister's life nowadays. When was the last time we had a meaningful conversation? Possibly last Christmas, and even then, our chat had been superficial, filled with trivial talk about the weather and Grace's job frustrations. What my parents didn't know was that my son Mason's health had been deteriorating. The symptoms were subtle at first: unexplained bruises, constant tiredness, a pallor that no amount of sunshine could remedy. Since his birth, he had been frail, and despite numerous doctor visits, a definitive diagnosis had eluded us. We received the crushing news: blood cancer. Sitting in Dr. Jackson's office, surrounded by children's cheerful drawings that contrasted starkly with our grim reality, the diagnosis was confirmed. "It's acute lymphoblastic leukemia," Dr. Jackson had said gently, her face somber as she handed me the test results. "This is overwhelming, I know, but we must start treatment immediately." I gripped Mason's small hand, struggling to keep composed. "What are his chances?" I asked, desperate for some hope. "Each case is unique," she began cautiously, her eyes conveying the seriousness of his condition. "We're seeing some concerning patterns in his recent tests. The treatment isn't working as well as we hoped." The following months were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and sleepless nights in hospital chairs by Mason's bedside. Liam, despite our divorce, was a pillar of support. "Whatever he needs, whatever it costs," he'd insist, his composure wavering when it came to our son's illness, determined to provide the best care possible. Stretched thin between hospital stays, work, and now this pressure from my family about the house, I found myself relenting more easily than I might have under different circumstances. Giving the house to Grace seemed trivial in the grand scheme of things, especially when my son was fighting for his life. I handed the keys to Grace one sunny afternoon, amidst the chaos of Mason's ongoing medical treatments. "I'll handle the paperwork once things calm down with Mason," I told her, my thoughts already drifting to the next doctor's appointment. Grace hugged me tightly for the first time in years, her perfume strong and slightly nauseating. "Thank you so much. I'm going to throw the best housewarming party ever next month. You'll come, right? And Mason too, if he feels up to it." Her enthusiasm barely registered with me. My mind was consumed with Mason's fragile health and the fading brightness in his eyes. In the hospital, one quiet evening, Mason's voice, barely a whisper, broke the heavy silence. "Mommy, am I going to get better?" The weight of his question crushed me, but I forced a smile, stroking his thin hair. Of course, sweetheart. You're the bravest boy I know. I lied, clinging to a sliver of hope. That hope briefly turned into reality when Mason started showing signs of improvement with a new treatment protocol. His cheeks regained some color, his appetite picked up, and he even asked to play with his toys again. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. "Mommy, can we go to the park this weekend?" he asked me one morning, his voice stronger. My heart leaped at his request, the first in many months he'd shown interest in the outside world. "As soon as you're strong enough, baby, we'll go to the park and feed the ducks, just like we used to. Can we invite Daddy too?" he added. "Of course we can," I promised, my heart swelling with tentative joy. However, that glimmer of hope was short-lived. A week later, a late-night call from the hospital shattered the stillness of my sleep. Mason had spiked a high fever and had been rushed back to the hospital. "Mrs. Peterson, you need to come to the hospital immediately. Mason's condition has deteriorated significantly," the nurse informed me, her voice calm yet urgent. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and rain-soaked streets, and my only thought was to reach my son as quickly as possible. By the time I arrived, it was too late. The medical team was already in a flurry of activity, but their somber expressions told me everything I needed to know. The following hours were a hellish nightmare of medical jargon, frantic interventions, and, ultimately, devastating silence. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Peterson. We did everything we could," Dr. Jackson managed to say through her tears. Mason's delicate system had simply been too weak to continue the fight. I sat beside his bed for hours, holding his small, cold hand, struggling to comprehend that my brave little boy was gone. As dawn broke, Liam arrived, his face pale with shock. "Emma," he whispered, pulling me into a hug, his voice cracking under the weight of our loss. Amidst my grief, I managed to send a text to Grace. "Mason died. Funeral in 2 days." Her reply came back 10 minutes later, a single, emotionless word. "Okay." Stunned, I called my mother, needing the comfort only she could provide. However, her response left me reeling. "Oh, yes, Grace told us," she said, her tone distant. "Listen, honey, about the funeral. We won't be able to make it. We have other commitments that day." I echoed her words in disbelief, my voice hollow. Other commitments? The world seemed to spin off its axis. Yes, Grace's housewarming party is that day. The callous disregard, the stark contrast between life's profound sorrow and trivial celebrations, left me speechless and shattered all over again. I clenched the phone, my grip so tight that my knuckles turned white. "Mom, we're talking about Mason's funeral." "Your grandson's funeral?" I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I know, dear, and it's very sad, but life does have to go on." My mother's voice was pragmatic, almost indifferent. "Grace has been planning this party for weeks. We've invited everyone already. It would be such a hassle to reschedule." I was dumbfounded. How could my mother choose a housewarming party over her grandson's funeral? The world had already stopped making sense when Mason's heart had stopped beating, but this was incomprehensible. My hands shook as I dialed Grace's number. "What are you thinking?" I demanded the moment she answered, my phone nearly slipping from my trembling fingers. "Why are you having your party on the day of Mason's funeral?" "Because that's the day I want to have it," she responded, her tone cold and detached. In the background, I could hear music and the sound of her moving around her new home. "I've been planning this. All the invitations are out." "Grace, this is my son's funeral we're talking about. My son, your nephew, the little boy who used to make your birthday cards every year. Can't you move the party?" "Why should I?" she snapped back. I heard a crash in the background. "It's just a funeral. He's dead anyway. It doesn't matter to him when he's buried. I'm alive, and I want to celebrate my new house. Do you know how long I've waited for this?" The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering against the kitchen floor. At that moment, something inside me broke, and something else, harder and colder, took its place. I recalled all the times Grace had comforted me during Mason's illness, All the promises she made to be there. Had it all been just for show? The funeral passed in a haze of black clothes and hushed condolences. Liam stood by my side, a steady presence, his hand occasionally squeezing mine when the sorrow became too much. My mother and stepfather appeared for exactly 15 minutes, their discomfort palpable under the black coats they'd hastily thrown over their party attire. "We can't stay long," my mother murmured, avoiding my gaze. "Grace needs help setting up." I watched them leave, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. Their car hadn't even cleared the parking lot before I saw my mother on her phone, likely coordinating party details with Grace. "Did you hear about Grace's party?" my cousin Abigail whispered to me during the reception. "She invited half the town. None of us are going, of course. It's not right. We all told her so, but she wouldn't listen." I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. The deed to the grandmother's house was still legally mine. Grace might have the keys, but she didn't have the paperwork, not the legal right to host anything there. At 7 p.m. sharp, I knew exactly what needed to be done. As the hour approached when Grace's party would be in full swing, I made 2 decisive phone calls. The first was to the local police. My voice didn't falter as I reported unauthorized people occupying my grandmother's house. I provided the address and firmly stated that the property was being used without my consent. The second call was to my lawyer, ensuring that all property documents were still in my name and no transfers had been made. "Everything's exactly as it should be," he confirmed. "The house is still legally yours." I arrived at the scene just as the police did. The sound of a pop song about celebration echoed through the air, and through the windows, I could see a crowd dancing and laughing, with Grace at the center, playing the perfect hostess in a dress she probably bought just for the occasion. The police were quick and professional. I presented them with a property deed, my name prominently displayed as the rightful owner. "This is my property," I declared, my voice carrying over to where the music abruptly stopped. "These people are here without my permission." The ensuing chaos was almost cathartic. Grace's face morphed from confusion to outright anger as her guests quickly dispersed, unwilling to be caught up in a legal dispute. Her party setup, once vibrant, now looked garish and misplaced in the glaring light of the unfolding drama. "But she gave me this house." Grace shrieked, tears ruining her mascara as she pointed accusingly at me. "Tell them, Mom. Tell them how she promised it to me." Our mother and stepfather tried to step in, but without legal documentation, their attempts were futile. "Show me the paperwork," I said calmly, amidst the wreckage of Grace's ruined celebration. "Show me where I legally transferred this house to you." After the guests had left and we were alone, Grace's facade of control completely shattered. Her face twisted with fury. She lashed out with words meant to wound deeply. "You stuck-up brat," she yelled, tipping over a vase and sending flowers and water across the floor. "You've always had everything. Rich husband, big house, everyone's sympathy. I hate you. I'm glad your husband left you, and I'm glad your brat is dead." The room fell deathly silent. I turned to my mother, searching for any sign of shock or disgust. Instead, she stood by Grace, her expression hardened with resentment. "You've always been selfish, Emma," she hissed. "Always thinking you're better than everyone else, just because you married rich, just because you had a sick child that everyone felt sorry for." A cold clarity settled over me as I faced them, remembering all the support I had provided over the years. Monthly payments of $2,200, holiday gifts, surprise packages, and even financing a cruise and home renovations are all taken for granted. "Let me make this very clear," I said, my voice icy with resolve. "From this moment on, the financial support stops. All of it. The monthly deposits, the gifts, the random acts of generosity you've come to expect. It's done." My mother blanched. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I? You chose a housewarming party over your grandson's funeral. You're defending someone who just celebrated my child's death. Watch me." My stepfather took a step forward, his face flushed with a mix of anger and desperation. "Emma, let's not be hasty. We all say things we don't mean." But it was too late for apologies or excuses. I had seen their true colors, and there was no going back. The line had been drawn, and from that moment on, I knew that my life and my allegiance would be profoundly different. When we're upset, every word means something. I interjected sharply, cutting him off mid-sentence. You won't see another penny from me, ever. Get out of my house, all of you, and don't ever contact me again. You can't do this to us. My mother's voice cracked the reality of what she was losing finally hitting her. No, I replied firmly. Parents don't do what you did. Parents don't choose a party over their grandson's funeral. Parents don't defend someone who celebrates a child's death. You're just people I used to know. This isn't over. Grace threatened as they left, but the fear in her eyes was evident. She had always relied on her parents, and now I had just cut off their main source of extra income. You'll regret this, she hissed. The next day, social media was ablaze with my mother's posts about my supposed cruelty and Grace's tearful comments about becoming homeless. However, they conveniently omitted the part about choosing the party over Mason's funeral. The truth quickly surfaced. Our relatives and friends, who had been at the funeral and seen the party invitations, knew what happened. Who throws a party on the day of their nephew's funeral? My cousin Abigail publicly commented. And who helps prepare for that party instead of attending their grandson's funeral? Shame on all of you. The backlash was swift and merciless. Grace's posts about sisterly betrayal were met with widespread disgust and condemnation. When someone leaked information about the substantial financial support I had been providing over the years, the public reaction grew even more scathing. Grace was forced to shut down her social media accounts as people shared the story of her heartless celebration and our parents' enabling behavior. Months passed, and I was beginning to heal, attending weekly therapy sessions and learning to live with the Mason-shaped hole in my heart. My therapist, Dr. Anderson, helped me work through the layers of grief, not just for Mason, but for the family I thought I had. Then one day, my neighbors called about vandalism at my grandmother's house. Someone's breaking all the windows, Mrs. Jenkins reported, her voice shaking. I can hear the glass shattering. Thanks to the security cameras I'd installed, a precaution that now seemed prescient, I had clear footage of Grace methodically smashing every window in the house. Her face was twisted with hatred as she hurled rocks through each pane. I didn't hesitate to press charges. When my mother called, begging me to reconsider, her plea fell on deaf ears. You'll ruin her career, she wailed over the phone. She'll lose her job at the city administration. Think about her future. Like she thought about Mason's funeral? I replied coldly and hung up. Grace was fired when the video went viral. The court ordered her to pay substantial fines and damages. Last I heard, she was unemployed and living with our parents, her once prestigious position at the city administration lost, just another casualty of her destructive actions. Some might call it cruel, but in that moment, justice felt right. I feel no remorse. Each time I visit Mason's grave, the sting of Grace's cruel words about my brat and her decision to celebrate during his funeral resurfaces. Some actions are simply unforgivable. Recently, my therapist inquired whether I had considered reconciling with my family. Gazing through her office window at a spring tree beginning to bloom, I responded firmly, they're not my family anymore. Family doesn't do what they did. I'm learning to live again, taking it one day at a time. Mason taught me about unconditional love, the kind that endures even when your heart is fragmented into countless pieces. Grace, on the other hand, illustrated unconditional hate, a destructive force that consumes everything in its path. Through these experiences, I've come to understand that the family you're born into isn't always the family you keep. Now, as I sit in the quiet of my home, surrounded by photographs of Mason, I am certain I made the right decision. Some bridges, once burned, should indeed remain as ashes. Sometimes, the best way to honor the memory of those we've lost is to sever ties with those who dishonor their passing. This painful yet clear realization has shaped a new path for me, one where I can cherish the love and legacy Mason left behind, free from the shadows of those who failed to respect it. My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm 55 years old. I've spent the last 25 years working at a financial consulting firm in Los Angeles. This company has been my second home, and I've dedicated my life to serving our clients. Over the years, I've built strong relationships with 35 clients, offering them personalized financial strategies. But recently, everything changed. A new president took over the company after the former president, a man who knew and appreciated my work, fell ill. This new leader, however, didn't take the time to understand the internal dynamics or the value I brought to the team. Instead, he listened to Jack and Lisa, two colleagues who had their own agenda. Jack, who is 45, became the head of the finance department about 4 months ago. Since his promotion, he changed drastically. He used to be polite and respectful, but now his tone is filled with condescension and complaints. Lisa, his 32-year-old assistant, seemed to follow his lead. They both targeted me, accusing me of exploiting overtime and dragging down the department's performance. It all started subtly. Jack would leave a pile of client files on my desk at the end of the day, with impossible deadlines. Lisa would make snide remarks about my efficiency, always within earshot of others. They were relentless, and it was clear they wanted me gone. They believed cutting labor costs and eliminating overtime pay were essential, and they saw me as an obstacle. One particularly grueling evening, after Jack had left yet another month's worth of client files on my desk, I confronted him. "Jack, these files have deadlines this month. How am I supposed to manage all this alone?" He shrugged, not even bothering to look up from packing his things. "Figure it out, Sarah. It's your job. I'm heading out." Lisa, who had been eavesdropping, laughed as she followed him out. "Good luck, Sarah," she said mockingly. The weight of the files in front of me was nothing compared to the weight of their constant harassment. Despite the challenges, I continued to manage my duties. I couldn't afford to show weakness. My clients depended on me, and I had always taken pride in my ability to deliver exceptional service. But the stress was taking its toll. Jack and Lisa's criticisms became more frequent, and their accusations of me inflating overtime hours grew louder. The breaking point came when the new president called me into his office. Jack and Lisa were already there, wearing smug expressions. The president looked at me with a mix of confusion and frustration. "Sarah, I've been informed that your overtime hours are significantly higher than anyone else's in the department. While others have around 16 hours, you've exceeded 82. Can you explain this?" I took a deep breath, feeling the sting of betrayal. "Mr. President, the overtime is because I've been handling not only my workload but also the additional tasks Jack and Lisa have been offloading onto me. I've always worked hard to meet our clients' needs, but this recent increase is due to their actions, not mine." Jack interrupted, shaking his head. "That's not true. You're the one exploiting the system, Sarah. We all work hard, but you seem to think you deserve special treatment." Lisa nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Your constant overtime is dragging down our performance." The president sighed deeply. "I understand your concerns, Sarah, but without concrete evidence, I can't justify this level of overtime. We need to cut costs, and this is becoming a significant issue. I'm afraid I have to ask for your resignation." My heart sank. After 25 years of dedication, it had come to this. I could see Jack and Lisa's satisfaction as the president delivered his decision. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll resign by the end of the month." As I left the office, Lisa couldn't resist a parting shot. "Thanks for quitting, Sarah," she sneered. I maintained a silent, steady gaze, not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction. This company had been my life, and their betrayal cut deep. But I wasn't going to let them see me crumble. I would leave with my head held high, and they would soon realize the consequences of their actions. The days following my resignation were some of the hardest of my life. Leaving a place I had devoted 25 years to was a painful process. I spent my last days at the company tying up loose ends, creating detailed handover documents for all my 35 clients, and scheduling farewells. Many of my clients were shocked to hear of my departure, and it broke my heart to see their disappointment. Some expressed concerns about the future of their financial strategies without me. As I packed up my office on the final day, Jack and Lisa seemed unusually cheerful. Their plan had worked. They had pushed me out to cut costs and eliminate my supposed overtime exploitation. However, their celebration was premature. A week after my resignation, I finally had a moment to relax at home. I thought I had left the chaos behind, but my phone started ringing incessantly. When I saw the company's number on the screen, I hesitated. After a few moments, I reluctantly answered. "Hello, this is Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sarah, this is the president. We need you to come back to the office immediately," he said, his voice strained with panic. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction. "I'm sorry, but I've already completed my resignation process," I replied calmly. "Please, Sarah. We're facing a crisis. Our clients are halting their transactions, and we don't know how to handle it. They're asking for you," he pleaded. Despite my desire to leave the company behind, I felt a sense of responsibility towards my clients. I agreed to go back, at least to see what was happening. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere was chaotic. The once orderly environment was now filled with frantic employees and ringing phones. Jack and Lisa were waiting for me in the lobby, their faces pale and haggard. It was a stark contrast to their usual smug expressions. "What's going on?" I asked, genuinely curious. Jack glared at me, frustration evident in his eyes. "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions. Not just from your clients, but from prospective companies we were planning to introduce," he said, his voice shaking. Lisa, looking equally distressed, added, "We've tried everything, but they insist on speaking with you. What did you do?" I shook my head, confused. "I haven't done anything, but I can guess why this is happening." I could see the fear in their eyes, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of an explanation just yet. "Take me to the president." In the president's office, the tension was palpable. Jack and Lisa followed me in, their accusatory glares still fixed on me. The president looked up, relief washing over his face when he saw me. "Sarah, thank you for coming. Can you explain what's going on?" he asked. I took a deep breath. Our clients don't need us to manage their finances. There are plenty of firms that offer cheaper services. They stayed with us because of the personalized strategies I provided. They valued the relationship we built over the years. Jack scoffed. "That's nonsense. We have a manual for a reason. It's efficient and practical." I looked at him, my patience wearing thin. "It might be efficient for you, but our clients valued the tailored approach I provided. That's why they're leaving. They trusted me." The president sighed deeply, understanding dawning on his face. "Jack, Lisa, I've received numerous complaints about your conduct. It seems you've been offloading your work onto subordinates, inflating expense claims, and engaging in an inappropriate relationship." Jack and Lisa's faces turned white. "That's not true," Lisa protested. "We've been working hard to improve the department." The president shook his head. "The evidence says otherwise. I have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Their desperate pleas fell on deaf ears. As they were escorted out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. They had pushed me out, thinking they were saving the company, but their actions had brought it to the brink of disaster. After the chaos settled, the president turned to me. "Sarah, I made a mistake in letting you go. The company needs you. Would you consider coming back?" I hesitated. The betrayal I had felt was still fresh, but I also felt a sense of duty towards the clients who had supported me. "I need some time to think about it," I replied. As I left the office, I knew that my decision would not be easy. Returning meant facing the same environment that had caused me so much pain, but it also meant continuing to help the clients I cared about. I would have to weigh my options carefully, and whatever decision I made would shape the next chapter of my life. Returning home after that chaotic day, I couldn't shake off the president's plea for me to come back. I spent the night pondering my options. The betrayal I felt from Jack and Lisa still stung, but I also felt a deep sense of responsibility towards my clients. They had shown loyalty to me, and I didn't want to let them down. The next morning, after a restless night, I decided to meet with a few of my closest clients to hear their thoughts. I called up Mr. Anderson, one of my longest-standing clients, and arranged a meeting at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, Mr. Anderson greeted me warmly. "Sarah, it's good to see you. I've been worried about the company since you left. What happened?" I took a deep breath and explained the situation, from the harassment by Jack and Lisa to the president asking for my resignation. Mr. Anderson listened intently, his expression growing serious. "Sarah, you've always been the backbone of our financial planning. Without you, the company has lost its personal touch. That's why many of us decided to halt our transactions. We trusted you, not the company." His words hit me hard. It wasn't just about the job, it was about the relationships I had built over the years. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Your support means a lot to me," I said, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. After speaking with a few more clients who echoed Mr. Anderson's sentiments, I realized that my decision had to be about more than just returning to the same toxic environment. I needed to ensure that the company understood the value of personalized service and that the toxic behavior of people like Jack and Lisa wouldn't be tolerated again. I went back to the president's office the next day, feeling more resolute. He looked relieved to see me. "Sarah, have you made a decision?" "Yes," I said firmly. "But there need to be some changes. First, I want assurances that the toxic behavior that drove me out won't be allowed to continue. Second, we need to shift our focus back to personalized client service. That's what sets us apart, and that's why our clients stay with us." The president nodded, listening carefully. "I understand, Sarah. I admit that I made a mistake by listening to Jack and Lisa without understanding the full picture. I'll make sure that we address these issues. We need you back." With his assurance, I agreed to return, but under the condition that we would work together to rebuild the company's reputation and reinforce a culture of respect and dedication. Upon my return, I was greeted with a mixture of relief and apprehension from my colleagues. They had seen the chaos that ensued after my departure and realized the impact I had on the company. The president held a meeting, addressing the entire staff about the changes that were going to be implemented, emphasizing the importance of respect, dedication, and personalized client service. As I settled back into my role, I noticed a significant shift in the office atmosphere. The toxic tension that had been prevalent during Jack and Lisa's time was replaced with a renewed sense of teamwork and purpose. People were more supportive, and there was a collective effort to restore the company's standing with our clients. However, rebuilding trust with the clients was not an overnight task. I spent countless hours meeting with them, assuring them that the personalized service they valued would continue. Many were relieved to see me back and appreciated the efforts the company was making to address past issues. It was a challenging period, but their support and trust made it worthwhile. One evening, as I was wrapping up a long day, the president walked into my office. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you personally. The changes you've implemented have made a significant difference. Our clients are starting to trust us again, and the staff morale is improving." I smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I'm glad to see things getting better." As I looked around my office, I realized how much had changed since that first day when I announced my resignation. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been a testament to the value of resilience and dedication. The company was on a path to recovery, and I was proud to be a part of it. But I knew the story wasn't over yet. There were still challenges ahead, and the true test would be maintaining the positive changes in the long run. For now, though, I felt a sense of fulfillment and anticipation for what the future held. As the weeks turned into months, the company gradually stabilized. Our clients began to return, reassured by the changes we had implemented. The atmosphere in the office continued to improve, and there was a genuine sense of camaraderie among the staff. The president kept his promise, ensuring that the toxic behaviors of the past would not be repeated. It seemed like we were on the right track. Despite the positive changes, I felt a lingering unease. The betrayal I had experienced had left a deep scar, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my time at the company was drawing to a natural close. My dedication to my clients had never wavered, but my passion for the job had been irrevocably altered. One afternoon, while reviewing some client files, I received a call from an old friend, Rachel, who owned a small financial consultancy firm. We hadn't spoken in years, but she had heard about the turmoil at my company and wanted to catch up. During our conversation, she mentioned needing help with a growing client base and suggested I join her firm. The idea intrigued me. Rachel's firm was much smaller and more personal, and it seemed like an opportunity to continue doing what I loved without the burden of corporate politics. After our call, I spent the evening considering her offer. It felt like the perfect chance to start fresh and regain my passion for financial consulting. The next morning, I arranged a meeting with the president. As I sat down in his office, he looked at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Sarah, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. I've been thinking about my future here. While I appreciate the changes we've made and the support I've received, I believe it's time for me to move on. I've received an offer to join a friend's consultancy firm, and I think it's the right step for me. The president seemed surprised but nodded understandingly. "I can't say I'm not disappointed, but I understand your decision. You've been invaluable to us, and I'm grateful for everything you've done." We discussed my transition plan to ensure a smooth handover of my responsibilities. The president assured me that they would continue to uphold the values and changes we had implemented. I felt a sense of relief and excitement about this new chapter in my life. During my final days at the company, I made sure to meet with each of my clients, explaining my decision and introducing them to their new consultants. Many of them were sad to see me go but understood and supported my choice. I left knowing they were in good hands. On my last day, the office held a small farewell party. As I looked around at my colleagues and friends, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. This place had been my home for 25 years, and leaving wasn't easy. But I knew it was the right decision. Rachel welcomed me warmly into her firm, and I quickly settled into the new environment. The work was fulfilling, and I appreciated the close-knit, supportive atmosphere. For the first time in years, I felt truly content and inspired. Looking back on my journey, I realized that the challenges I faced had only made me stronger. The betrayal and harassment had been painful, but they had also led me to a place where I could thrive. I found satisfaction in knowing that I had stood up against unfair treatment and emerged resilient. As I moved forward in my new role, I remained dedicated to providing personalized, high-quality service to my clients. The experience had taught me the value of integrity, dedication, and the importance of finding fulfillment outside a toxic environment. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead. My name is Stella, and at 31 years old, I am the proud owner of a thriving cleaning company called Clean Life. Despite what some might think about cleaning work, I find great satisfaction in it. I started this business on my own 8 years ago, and it has now expanded to employ 80 staff members, boasting annual sales of over $5 million. However, my family, especially my younger brother, Arthur, sometimes view me simply as a janitor. Arthur is 23 and is currently studying medicine at a prestigious private state university, where the annual tuition is $85,000. For the past 3 years, I've been paying for all his educational expenses that his student loans don't cover, as our parents are not in a position to afford it. I've always wanted to support his dream of becoming a doctor. Reflecting on our childhood brings back vivid memories. I can still recall the moment I first held Arthur in the hospital waiting room when I was 10 years old. "Stella, this is your brother, Arthur," my mother whispered as I cautiously held him. The warmth of his tiny body is a sensation that remains with me to this day. "Please help take good care of Arthur," my father gently urged, instilling in me a lifelong sense of responsibility. Growing up, our parents worked hard to provide for us, my father at a local factory and my mother part-time at a grocery store. They endeavored tirelessly to shield us from hardship. After school, it was routine for me to look after Arthur, assist him with his homework, and prepare our snacks. Although we occasionally bickered, our bond as siblings was strong and loving. Arthur's ambition to pursue medicine was ignited one winter during his 2nd grade when he fell critically ill with pneumonia. It wasn't just a cold as we first thought. It escalated quickly, leading to a frightening midnight rush to the emergency room. With both parents unable to leave work, I, then a high school student, skipped classes to be by his side. "Don't worry, I'm here with you," I reassured him as he lay struggling, hooked up to an IV and an oxygen mask. During his hospital stay, we shared a room with other patients, where I would often stay overnight to care for him. "This girl really takes good care of her brother," remarked an elderly lady in the room to a nurse. Arthur's admiration for the medical profession grew during this time, particularly after witnessing Dr. Vincent, a compassionate and skilled doctor, manage emergencies with calm and proficiency. On the day Arthur was discharged, inspired by Dr. Vincent's dedication, he expressed his determination to become a doctor. Dr. Vincent smiled warmly and encouraged him. "Then you'll need to study hard and always remember to be kind." Arthur looked at me and added, "Yes, I'll do my best while learning from my sister." As we left the hospital, Arthur glanced back at the ward and promised, "Stella, I promise I will become a doctor and help those in need." His resolve and the sparkle in his eyes were clearer than ever. That challenging experience not only shaped Arthur's career aspirations, but also strengthened our sibling bond, reminding us of the enduring support and care we have for each other. After high school, I started working part-time in the cleaning industry to support our household and save a bit for my own future educational needs. Initially, I felt a bit embarrassed about the job, but I quickly learned that cleaning involves meticulous, often unseen efforts and distinct skills. My first gig was at a small local clinic. I would arrive early in the morning to polish the waiting room floors, wipe down the windows, and scrub the toilets. One day, the clinic director expressed his gratitude, saying, "Thanks to you, Miss Stella, our patients can receive their treatments in a comfortable environment." His words significantly shifted my view of cleaning. Another memorable compliment came from a patient who remarked, "The place looks brand new after you clean it up, Stella." These affirmations of my hard work are something I still hold dear. After graduating, I secured a position with a large building maintenance company. I was drawn to the role because I believed in the underlying principle that cleaning supports people's everyday lives. During my time there, I learned various cleaning techniques and management skills. By my 2nd year, I was managing the cleaning of a large commercial facility, overseeing a team of over 250 staff members. The work was intense, starting before dawn and often extending late into the night. I occasionally covered multiple shifts, including late and early ones, and worked extensive overtime to fill in for absent staff. These were incredibly busy days, but they taught me invaluable lessons. Our team was diverse, from elderly workers with years of experience to part-time housewives balancing jobs and family life. Listening to their stories in the break room, elderly employees struggling physically and housewives juggling shifts and childcare responsibilities, I started to envision running my own business. I wanted to create a better work environment for my colleagues, one that would support their lives as much as they supported others through their cleaning. Encouraged by an older colleague who noticed my dedication and attention to detail, "Stella, you are really suited for this job," I began to educate myself on business management. I read articles for budding entrepreneurs during my breaks and attended management seminars on weekends. Gradually, the dream of starting my own business began to take shape. Meanwhile, my brother Arthur, then in middle school, was ardently pursuing his dream of becoming a doctor. He consistently excelled academically. His desk was always piled high with textbooks and workbooks. Despite our tight family finances, which made private tutoring unaffordable, Arthur remained undeterred. He would arrive at school before anyone else and stay late in the library to study. On weekends, he was at the state library from opening to closing. "Arthur, you're working so hard every day. You'll surely become a wonderful doctor," our mother would say with a mix of pride and melancholy. During his high school entrance exams, Arthur aimed for a school known for its high academic standards. His dedication during this critical period was as intense as my commitment to my career, both of us driven by our ambitions and the desire to make a meaningful impact in our chosen fields. I was determined not to let Arthur abandon his dreams. "Don't worry, I'll support you with everything I have," I assured him, using my earnings to buy him reference books and secretly treating him to snacks when he looked exhausted. On the eve of his exam, I stayed up with him, soothing his anxieties. "Stella, what if things don't go well tomorrow?" he worried. "Don't stress, Arthur. You've prepared well," I reassured him. The relief and joy of seeing his examination number on the pass list are etched deeply in my memory. When he found out he passed, Arthur hugged me, tears in his eyes, saying, "It's all thanks to you, Stella. Thank you so much." At 27, fueled by a desire to forge my path, I resigned from my job to start my own cleaning company. I had managed to save $470,000 from my part-time jobs and years of work. Armed with a business plan, I approached various banks, but none took me seriously. The cleaning industry has a low entry barrier and too much competition, they said. Starting a business as a woman is still seen as a risk. Despite these discouraging words, I persisted. My first contract came through a recommendation from a former colleague. It was a basic cleaning job at an elementary school where her friend worked. The pay wasn't great, but it marked the humble beginning of my business. "Miss Stella, you clean so meticulously. We're grateful to have you," the vice principal commented. His appreciation led to another job, cleaning an office building managed by the PDA president. I worked tirelessly, managing the on-site tasks during the day and handling accounting and sales at night. During a late-night cleaning of an office, an employee who was also working overtime approached me. "Miss Stella, it must be tough working so late every day," he noted. "No, I'm happy to help," I replied. That brief interaction led him to recommend my services for his company's office cleaning. Gradually, more job offers came in, and I was able to hire a few employees. My company started to thrive. Then, one day, a life-changing call came. "Stella, I got into medical school," Arthur exclaimed over the phone. His dream had come true. I couldn't contain my excitement and rushed to the university during a work break. When we found his name among the accepted students, we hugged and rejoiced together. However, our parents' expressions were mixed. Medical school tuition is over $90,000 a year, my mother said, her voice shaking. "We can't afford that. I'll pay for it," I declared impulsively. Though my company was doing well, financing such a substantial amount yearly would be challenging. "Stella, that's too much for you," my father said, worry clear in his expression. "It's okay. I want to support Arthur's dream," I insisted. Arthur, overwhelmed with gratitude, burst into tears. "Stella, I will definitely repay your kindness," he promised. Inspired by his words, I worked even harder. I went out daily to secure new contracts and strove to minimize labor costs by working on-site myself. Seeing my relentless efforts, one of my employees said, "You're pushing yourself too hard. Let us help with what we can." Taking his advice to heart, I began delegating more tasks. Gradually, the company continued to grow, as did the number of our employees. In the midst of all this, my personal sacrifices increased significantly. I stopped spending on myself, skipping new clothes, and even working through holidays. Seeing Arthur thrive in medical school somehow made all my sacrifices worthwhile. Yet, as Arthur's academic journey progressed, I noticed subtle shifts in our family dynamics. At a family memorial service, the change became apparent. Our Arthur has been accepted into medical school, my mother boasted to every relative. Her stories were met with praises like impressive and how commendable, which visibly swelled her pride. However, when asked about me, her response was lukewarm. "Is Stella still in the cleaning business?" an aunt inquired. My mother's enthusiasm dimmed as she replied vaguely, "Well, yes." My father's behavior altered too. He began boasting about Arthur's aspirations to become a neurosurgeon at his weekly chess gatherings, reveling in the admiration of his peers. This praise seemed to bolster his ego. One evening at dinner, as I discussed a potential new contract for my business, my father interrupted, "Stella, how long do you plan to keep doing that kind of job?" My mother added, "Right, Arthur's classmate might introduce him to a medical office job. It's much better than cleaning." Their words, reducing my career to just cleaning, stung deeply. As Arthur excelled in medical school, our parents' pride escalated. They began to share his achievements with neighbors and during his hospital internships, boasting, "Our son is so well regarded by the doctors, he might stay on at the university hospital." My contributions, particularly how I financed his education, seemed to fade from their narrative. During the end-of-year cleaning, as I tried to impart some professional cleaning tips, my mother's hesitant look told me everything. "Stella, it seems this kind of job suits you," she remarked, a hint of resignation in her tone. My father even started planning his retirement around Arthur's anticipated earnings, speculating, "Once Arthur becomes a doctor and works at a big hospital, he'll easily make over $320,000 a year." Home conversations increasingly revolved solely around Arthur. I felt as if my existence was slowly being erased. At family gatherings, discussions about my business were swiftly overshadowed by updates about Arthur. "Stella is managing," my mother would say briefly, quickly shifting to, "But Arthur?" A turning point came at a neighborhood Christmas party. "Your son is in medical school? That's really impressive," a neighbor commented. My mother responded with evident pride, "Yes, perhaps it's a result of our upbringing. We've inspired him to pursue a dream in healthcare." I was taken aback by her words, feeling as though my daily efforts and financial sacrifices had been completely overlooked. Frustrated and feeling undervalued, I decided it was best to distance myself from my family home. This decision allowed me to maintain a relationship with them without the constant overshadowing of my contributions. However, a significant event soon disrupted our family dynamic further. It was during the autumn of Arthur's senior year that he began dating a fellow medical student, Maya. She was the talented and beloved only daughter of a family that owned one of the top general hospitals in Boston. Arthur was enamored. "Maya is amazing, but I'd like to know more about her. Can you introduce me sometime?" I asked him during a call. Yeah, sure, but it's exam period now, so maybe later," he replied. This promise repeated over the years, yet I never got the chance to meet Maya. Initially, I wasn't too concerned, understanding the hectic nature of medical school life. Though work kept me occupied, an unsettling feeling began to creep in regarding my brother, Arthur, and his relationship with Maya. One evening, while heading home from a long day, I unexpectedly caught sight of Arthur and Maya chatting animatedly in front of a high-end restaurant. Just as I was about to approach them and say hello, Arthur's demeanor abruptly changed. He quickly ushered Maya inside, deliberately ignoring my presence. Confused and hurt, I couldn't understand why my brother seemed to be avoiding me. Then came the disconcerting phone call from my mother about our upcoming family Christmas party, an event steeped in tradition and one I had never missed. Her voice was heavy with hesitation. "Maybe it's better if you don't come this year," she suggested. Shocked, I struggled to comprehend her words. The Christmas party had always been a time of joy for us. My mother's homemade cakes, my father's dress as Santa Claus, and the special moments of sharing handmade gifts with Arthur. It was more than a celebration. It was a reaffirmation of our family bonds. What do you mean? I asked, trying to mask the hurt in my voice. Well, Arthur is bringing Maya, and her parents will be coming too, my mother explained, her tone uneasy as if she was withholding more. That moment triggered a flood of memories. Nights spent caring for a feverish young Arthur, supporting him through his middle school entrance exams, and the countless sacrifices I had made for his future. These memories now seemed like relics of a distant past. Ironically, I had already met Maya a few months earlier under quite memorable circumstances. It happened on the day of a cleaning service bid at the General Hospital. After presenting my bid alongside other contractors, I was reviewing documents for the next project in the hallway when a hurried woman nearly collided with me. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, apologizing profusely. She looked familiar, and as I glanced at her name tag, it read Maya. Realizing she was Arthur's girlfriend, I introduced myself. "Are you Arthur's?" I asked. Surprised, she responded, "Yes, but I'm Stella, Arthur's sister." Maya seemed momentarily taken aback, but quickly offered a warm smile. "Oh, I've heard a lot about you from Arthur, but he never showed me a photo." We struck up a conversation, which flowed naturally, and soon we were deeply engaged in discussion. Maya was intelligent and kind, and I could see why Arthur was so smitten with her. "Could we keep this meeting between us?" Maya suggested playfully. "It would surprise him when we reveal that we've become good friends." I agreed, finding the idea fun. However, in retrospect, perhaps Maya wanted to keep our encounter a secret out of consideration for me. After that, we occasionally met for coffee. Then, the day after the unsettling call from my mother, Maya reached out to meet urgently. Her voice trembled as she spoke. We met at our usual cafe, and she appeared visibly distressed, her eyes red from crying. "Stella, I can't stand it anymore," she confessed, her voice shaky. "About the Christmas party, maybe I shouldn't say this." As I sat across from Maya in our usual cafe, the air between us was thick with tension. She took a deep breath and hesitantly started to share what she had inadvertently overheard, a conversation between Arthur and our mother that shook me to my core. Maya's family shouldn't find out that his sister is a janitor, they had said, worried that it could jeopardize Arthur's relationship and even his future career prospects in medicine. Hearing this felt like a betrayal, as if the bond one had with my brother for the last 25 years was being dismissed in a single stroke. Arthur had even suggested that I be excluded from family gatherings, seeing my profession as an obstacle to his ambitions. My parents had apparently agreed, rationalizing that it was for his future in the exclusive world of medicine. "Don't worry, Stella will understand," they had said, as if my feelings and sacrifices meant less than maintaining a facade to benefit Arthur. For years, I lived by the mantra, "Because you're the big sister," always putting Arthur's needs before my own. But now, this role felt profoundly shaken. As Maya continued, she revealed something even more personal. Her mother had been a janitor at a hospital for over 22 years, a job she performed with pride and dignity. "Cleaning is an important job that protects people's lives," her mother had always said. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she expressed deep respect and gratitude for her mother's work. At the Christmas party, despite knowing the conversation, Maya had expressed a desire to meet me, to which Arthur had derogatorily referred to my job as just a janitor. Overwhelmed, Maya's tears spilled over. "I can't be with someone who dismisses my mother's life like that," she said, trembling with emotion. That night, back in my office, I sat in the dark, lost in thought. The computer screen in front of me displayed the payment history for Arthur's tuition, over $90,000 paid over 5 years, not counting the additional loans I had taken out to cover his living expenses and tuition gaps. It was a stark reminder of the sacrifices I had made, the crystallization of my sweat and tears. Looking out the office window at the lonely nightscape, the phrase, "a janitor's sister," echoed hauntingly in my mind. But I am proud of my job. I support people's lives and maintain their environments. It's a role that is by no means a source of shame. In the days that followed, filled with anger and sadness, I received a brief message from Maya. I've decided to break up with Arthur. I cannot be with someone who dismisses my mother's life like that. Thank you for everything, Stella. Deep down, I might have sensed that our situation would lead here, but the reality struck me hard and fast. That night, I made the difficult decision to stop paying for Arthur's tuition. A few days later, a notice of unpaid tuition arrived at the university. Confused and angry calls came from both my parents and Arthur. What is this? Didn't you promise to pay for the tuition? My mother frantically asked. Stella, what happened? Arthur's future depends on this, she cried. It was a moment of reckoning. I realized I had to stand up for my dignity and show that my contributions and sacrifices were not to be taken for granted or hidden away as a source of shame. My father scolded me, but I stood my ground firmly. If having a janitor as a sister embarrasses you, then you shouldn't expect any help from me, I responded with a calm voice. Arthur, clearly distressed, called me. Stella, please, can you pay for my tuition? He pleaded. Why should I asked, equally calm. Am I not just a shameful janitor to you? He admitted his mistake. I was wrong and I'm sorry. Arthur, embarrassed by his earlier disdain for my job, realized the gravity of his situation when no other relatives would extend their help. His previous arrogance had worn thin their patience. Arthur had started medical school with a sense of superiority, but he soon decided to apply for a scholarship and took up a part-time job. A month later, he visited my workplace, noticeably thinner. Stella, I'm truly sorry, he confessed, his voice a mixture of regret and newfound humility. I've applied for a scholarship and started working part-time. I'll continue my studies independently. He then spoke of Maya, who helped him see the honor in janitorial work, changing his view entirely. Anyone who fails to see the value in your job shouldn't be a doctor, he admitted. I listened quietly, impressed but reserved. Your company is truly impressive, he remarked, his tone sincere. I didn't realize it before, but I am genuinely sorry. I thought being in medical school made me better than others. His voice was free of its former arrogance. After a thoughtful pause, I told him, from now on, you must stand on your own, but if you're really in trouble, you can still turn to me. Arthur nodded, his eyes wet with gratitude. Thank you, but I'll try to manage by myself as much as possible. That's how I can truly apologize to you. Months passed, and Arthur truly changed. He worked weekends at a local clinic and tutored on weekday evenings. Occasionally, he visited to share his experiences in medical school and his dreams of opening a community clinic, one not for the wealthy, but a place where everyone could feel welcomed and safe. His eyes no longer held vanity, only a firm resolve. From time to time, my mother would call, her voice heavy with regret, apologizing for past hurts. My father wrote letters expressing pride in my resilience and their mistake in judging me. If you can forgive us, let's be a family again, he wrote. I haven't responded yet. I need time, but I believe that one day we might reconcile. A year later, Arthur began an internship at a local clinic, coincidentally one that my company was contracted to clean. Dr. Arthur really understands the patient's feelings, a nurse remarked. He engaged warmly with the janitors and empathized deeply with his patients. Our sibling relationship strengthened, no longer based on pretense, but on a genuine understanding of each other. Arthur had come to recognize the true value of cleaning work. It wasn't just about cleaning. It was about supporting people's health and peace of mind, a job to be carried out with pride. I'm Jessie, a 30-year-old woman from a close-knit family that includes my mother, my younger sister Lisa, and my grandmother. My grandmother has been bedridden for quite some time, requiring constant care, which my mother provides tirelessly. As a result, she rarely steps out, dedicating her days and nights to our matriarch. Given these circumstances, I've stepped into the role of primary earner for our family. My days are a juggling act of multiple jobs and household responsibilities. Despite the challenges, I know my contributions keep our family afloat. When I return home each evening, I find my mother, Caitlin, beside my grandmother's bed. She greets me with a weary smile, her eyes shadowed by fatigue. "Mom, are you getting enough rest?" I ask, concerned. She shrugs off my worries with a laugh, committed as ever to her role. We lost my father when I was 10, and since then, my mother has raised Lisa and me single-handedly. She worked tirelessly to provide for us, often sacrificing her own needs. With my grandmother's help, we managed, especially during those years when my mother had to work late. I took on more responsibilities early on, helping to care for Lisa after school. I skipped college to start working immediately after high school, aiming to ease our financial burdens. However, when my grandmother fell ill, my mother had to leave her job to care for her full-time. Our financial stability then hinged on my earnings and my grandmother's modest pension. Although my mother often expressed regret over the situation, I was determined to do all I could for our family. Lisa, now in high school, seems unaware of the financial and emotional strains we face. She spends her time with friends and shows little interest in her studies. It's frustrating to see her so detached from our family's challenges, but my mother insists on allowing Lisa the freedom to enjoy her teenage years, never scolding her for her carefree attitude. In this family, each of us plays a vital role, shaped by necessity and bound by love. While the days are long and the responsibilities heavy, I am committed to supporting my family through these tough times, just as they have supported me. I often wished that Lisa could understand our family's precarious situation better. "Mom, are we broke again? I want to go to a party with my friends," she complained loudly as she entered the house, her heels clicking against the floor. "Didn't I just give you your allowance for the month?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's not enough. And Mom, you're always busy with Grandma and never have time for me," she retorted, her tone a mix of demand and disappointment. My mother offered a strained smile. "Lisa, I'm sorry, but we don't have extra money right now." Lisa clicked her tongue in frustration and slammed her bag down. "Ugh, this is the worst. Why was I even born into this family?" she exclaimed, causing me to raise an eyebrow at her harsh words. "Have you ever thought about how lucky you are?" I challenged her. "That's easy for you to say, Jessie. You have your own money because you work," she snapped back. "If it's so easy, why don't you try earning some yourself?" Lisa glared at me, but then diverted her attention to her smartphone, typing furiously. She just wouldn't listen. Despite her attitude, my mother continued to indulge her, and as Lisa finished high school, she neither sought work nor further education, instead spending her days dreaming of a glamorous life. Inspired by a past vacation, Lisa often spoke about wanting to open a French restaurant in Florida. "Hey, Mom, if I open a restaurant in Florida, will you help me?" she asked one day, her eyes alight with excitement. "That would be wonderful, Lisa," my mother replied, her voice a mix of surprise and delight. "But, opening a restaurant takes a lot of money." "It'll be fine. I'll figure it out," Lisa declared, her confidence unshaken by reality. I sighed, knowing her lack of experience. "Lisa, opening a restaurant isn't as simple as you think. Shouldn't you start by getting some work experience first?" "Oh, Jessie, you don't have any dreams, do you?" Lisa laughed, dismissing my concerns. Dreams? I had never really allowed myself the luxury of having dreams. My focus had always been on supporting our family, but Lisa's dreams seemed so detached from our reality. Then, one night, as I returned home from work in the pitch dark, only illuminated by the sparse streetlights, I noticed several missed calls from Lisa on my phone. A knot formed in my stomach. I called her back immediately, and she answered in a panic. "Jessie, please, I need your help," she pleaded, her voice edged with desperation. In the background, I could hear the buzz of a crowd. "Lisa, what's going on?" "I got into trouble. Please, come pick me up." Lisa's nights out had become frequent, and her drinking had escalated, often leading to trouble. "Where are you?" "In front of the downtown club. Please hurry." Reluctantly, I drove to her location. Upon arrival, I found a few police officers and Lisa sitting on the curb, disheveled with a scratch on her cheek. A man in a suit was speaking with the officers, looking visibly upset. "Are you her sister?" one of the officers asked as I approached. "Yes, what happened?" "It seems she hassled this gentleman over some drinks," the officer explained, signaling the gravity of the situation with a stern look. What started as a verbal spat quickly escalated when Lisa struck the man. Sighing, I glanced at my sister, who awkwardly looked away, trying to avoid my gaze. "No, it's not what you think. I just had too much to drink," she muttered. "But you did hit him, didn't you?" the officer asked sternly. "Yes, I'm sorry," Lisa admitted, and was arrested on the spot. When we got home later, my mother was anxiously waiting in the living room. As soon as she saw me alone, she rushed over. "Where's Lisa? What happened?" Taking a deep breath, I explained as calmly as I could. "Lisa's been arrested, Mom." Her face lost all color. "Arrested?
Why?
What did she do?" she asked, her voice trembling. I told her briefly about the incident. My mother sat down heavily, looking stunned. "She's not hurt, is she?" she asked after a moment, still in shock. "No, she's okay," I reassured her, feeling a heavy weight in my chest. The situation seemed far from resolved. Fortunately, Lisa was released the next day. It was her first offense, and the victim chose not to press charges. The police sternly warned her, but Lisa seemed unfazed, as if the whole ordeal didn't concern her. "Make sure this never happens again," they cautioned. At home, Lisa repeated excuses like it wasn't a big deal and she was just unlucky. My mother gently admonished her, "Please don't do this again," but didn't scold her further. Watching this, I couldn't contain my frustration. Why wasn't she being more strict? Enough already. You were only saved because the other party didn't press charges, but it could have been much worse, I exclaimed. Lisa looked away, annoyed. So what? It's not a big deal. Unable to hold back any longer, I snapped. Not a big deal? If that's what you really think, then I give up. Next time, it could be the end of your life. My harsh words finally silenced Lisa. Jessie, don't be so harsh. Lisa is repentant, isn't she? My mother interjected with a worried smile, placing her hand on Lisa's shoulder in an attempt to calm the situation. Repentant? She's not. I retorted coldly, crossing my arms. I've told you before, her drinking habits are terrible. Every time she drinks, she yells and hassles people, and I've been embarrassed by her many times. How many times have I had to pick her up? Can't she stop already? Shut up. I don't want to hear a lecture, Lisa muttered, slumping on the sofa and sulking, ignoring my words. The next morning, I was still troubled by the previous day's events, but Lisa was casually eating breakfast, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, I sighed. No matter what I said, it didn't seem to resonate with her. Hey, Mom, can you lend me some money? I need to relieve some stress and go shopping, Lisa asked nonchalantly.
What? Money?
Lisa, what are you talking about? I couldn't believe my ears. I just need a change of scenery, Jessie. It has nothing to do with you, so leave me alone. Nothing to do with me? Don't joke around, I said, unable to keep my anger in check. The cycle of irresponsibility and denial was exhausting. I fixed my gaze on Lisa, my eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and exasperation. Do you even realize the gravity of what happened yesterday? How can you dismiss it so easily? Lisa, preoccupied with her smartphone, retorted without looking up, Oh, quiet down. It's done, isn't it? It's far from done, Lisa. This is serious, I responded, my voice rising slightly with irritation. Jessie, you just don't know when to stop, she shot back, visibly annoyed by my persistence. I clenched my fists, trying to manage the swirling anger inside as our mother watched our exchange with a look of deep concern. Mom, I just need a little help, Lisa pleaded, turning to our mother with outstretched hands. As my mother reluctantly began to open her purse, I intervened swiftly. Mom, please don't. You're just enabling her. She hasn't shown any reflection on her actions from yesterday. We can't go on like this. You're always so harsh, Jessie, Lisa murmured, her attention returning to her phone. I bit back on any further arguments, recognizing the futility of continuing the conversation. During this time, our grandmother's health was clearly in decline. She had been confined to her bed for a long stretch, and recently her appetite had dwindled, her moments of lucidity fewer each day. "How are you feeling today, Grandma?" my mother asked softly, taking her frail hand in hers. Grandma barely managed to open her eyes, whispering a feeble, "Caitlin." "Mom, shouldn't we consider the hospital?" I suggested with concern. Shaking her head, my mother replied, "I've spoken to the doctors multiple times. They've said she could go at any moment." My heart sank with this news, the reality hitting harder than expected. That night, Grandma passed away quietly. My mother, tearful and grieving, clung to her hand, while I stood by, overwhelmed by the sudden void her departure left. The following day, the funeral brought together family and friends in mourning. My mother was particularly stricken, gazing long at Grandma's peaceful face, paralyzed by her sorrow. I remained close, a silent pillar of support. Returning home felt like entering a different world. The absence of Grandma's warm presence turned our home stark and somber. My mother collapsed onto the sofa, enveloped in a deep, silent grief. I sat beside her, lost in the stillness that now pervaded our home. Amidst the heavy air of mourning, Lisa seemed detached, distracted by her smartphone. She broke the silence with a thoughtless remark. "Could we maybe get donations from this?" Her casual tone was jarring. I stared at her, incredulous. "Lisa, really?
Now."
She shrugged off my glare. "If there's money, why not? I could use some." This time, even my mother's patience faltered. "Enough, Lisa," she said sharply, her voice tinged with frustration. Lisa dismissed her with a wave of her hand. "Relax, I'm just joking. Don't get so upset." In the days following, my mother drifted, her spirit dulled by the loss of Grandma, her lifelong anchor. She increasingly sought solace in Lisa's company, perhaps hoping to fill the void left behind. Each morning began with my mother at Lisa's door, asking, "What's on your agenda today, Lisa?" as though trying to find some direction for herself through her daughter's plans. Whenever my mother planned a shopping trip, she would invariably ask Lisa to accompany her. "I don't want to go alone, Lisa. Can you come with me?" This request, initially casual, turned into a source of frustration whenever Lisa refused. Whenever Lisa did agree, my mother's face would light up with relief, as if she had been granted a reprieve. Seeing this dynamic, I felt a pang in my heart. I understood my mother's loneliness, but her growing dependency on Lisa made me uneasy. As this dependency intensified, the atmosphere at home became increasingly strained, leading to misunderstandings between my mother and me. Lisa, however, seemed oblivious to these tensions. "Hey, Mom, it's time you cheered up," Lisa would say casually, her eyes glued to her smartphone. "Why don't we go to Florida? You've been tied down caring for Grandma for so long, and now that she's gone, you deserve a change of scenery." Her words, meant to be uplifting, only angered me. "Lisa, stop joking around. Grandma just passed away a month ago. You know that," I snapped, barely containing my frustration. "So what? Staying home will just make you depressed. Besides, Jessie, it has nothing to do with you, does it?" Lisa retorted, dismissive of my concerns. I was stunned. "I'm the one supporting this house," I replied sharply. "Whatever, Mom. What are you going to do?" Lisa asked, turning back to our mother, who sat silent, her expression uncertain. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me, fearing she might actually consider Lisa's whimsical idea. That night, I collapsed into bed, utterly exhausted from juggling concerns about home, work, my mother, and Lisa. It was becoming increasingly difficult to find rest. 3 months after my grandmother's death, as I returned home from work, I was greeted by an eerie silence. Neither my mother's nor Lisa's shoes were at the entrance. A sense of dread settled over me as I entered the living room. The furniture was untouched, but their personal belongings were missing, as if they had never existed. Then, My eyes caught a letter on the table addressed to me. To Jessie, we are moving to Florida for Lisa. She only has me now that Grandma is gone, and I want to be there for her. Thank you for everything. I am grateful to you. Please take care of yourself. Mom. I stood frozen, the letter in hand, disbelief coursing through me. No, I couldn't accept it. My mother had chosen Lisa over me despite all my efforts to support the family and care for my grandmother. The thought of them leaving everything behind to move to Florida filled me with a tumultuous mix of anger and emptiness. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts were a chaotic whirl of anger and despair. Sleep eluded me. Each time I closed my eyes, the silence seemed to amplify my swirling thoughts. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a notification from my bank. Suspicious attempts to withdraw money had been detected. I immediately opened the banking app and saw records of multiple withdrawal attempts from my account that morning. It didn't take long to put two together. It had to be my mother and Lisa. Shaking with rage, I realized the extent of their betrayal, even attempting to use my money to fund their escape. I promptly contacted the bank to block my cash card, and for added security, I suspended my credit cards as well. Are they out of their minds? I muttered under my breath, feeling a surge of anger, but also a hint of relief knowing I had taken action. I had sensed something amiss when, not long ago, my mother abruptly asked to borrow money. It had seemed strange then, and though reluctant, I had lent her the money without much thought. However, my suspicions had grown when I stumbled upon documents and photographs of properties in Florida spread out on our dining table. They detailed various houses and apartments, and it dawned on me then my mother and Lisa were planning to move to Florida. The loan request from my mother suddenly made sense. Perhaps it was meant for this very purpose. Realizing their intentions, I had preemptively changed the settings on my cards to restrict overseas use. If my mother and Lisa were planning to find themselves financially equipped in Florida, they were in for a surprise. As I pondered my next steps, I realized there was no reason for me to stay in this house. Neither Lisa nor my mother seemed to need me. It's time to end this, I resolved. I'll leave this house and start anew. As I packed my belongings, the phone rang. It was my mother. I hesitated, then answered. What do you want? I asked coldly. Well, actually, there's something I need to tell you, Jessie. My mother's voice trembled slightly. I already know about you and Lisa trying to use my money without permission. I replied, my voice calm but firm, holding back the waves of anger. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but Lisa, she just wouldn't listen. My mother said, her words trailing off. So, you betrayed me for Lisa? I pressed, needing clarity. It's not like that. But for Lisa, I thought living in Florida would be best for her dream of opening a French restaurant, she explained, her voice filled with confusion. That's enough, Mom. You're too lenient with Lisa. Have you forgotten how hard I've worked? My voice shook slightly with emotion, but I continued firmly. What do you think I've been working so hard for? I've seen all the attempts to withdraw money. There was a heavy silence before she finally spoke in a small voice. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. That doesn't fix this, I said sharply and hung up the phone. Almost immediately, Lisa called. I answered, still irate. Jessie, please help me. I don't have enough money to open the restaurant in Florida. Do something, Lisa pleaded, desperation in her voice. Sort it out yourself. You always rely on Mom and me. How long do you plan to keep acting like a child? If you need money, why don't you get a job? I said harshly, making my stance clear. There was silence on the line before Lisa finally responded. I didn't mean for it to be like this. It's too late for any excuses. This is it for us, I declared, ending the conversation definitively. After hanging up, I told myself, this is the end. As I looked around the now half-empty house, a mix of relief and resolution settled within me. After blocking the contacts of both my mother and sister Lisa, I began the process of leaving the house. As I packed my belongings, feelings of bitterness and betrayal weighed heavily on me. I had dedicated myself tirelessly to my family's needs, only to be exploited in return. It was a painful realization, but it made my decision to sever ties and start anew all the more resolute. Living alone for the first time was initially disconcerting, yet it brought an unexpected peace. I cherished waking up at my leisure, spending evenings indulging in my interests rather than shouldering familial obligations. Freed from the burden of supporting others, I redirected my energy into personal growth. I pursued further education, enrolled in courses for career advancement, and even sought out certifications in fields that had always piqued my interest. Each day felt rich and rewarding, a stark contrast to my previous life constrained by family duties. A few months into my new lifestyle, I received a promotion at work, which came with a substantial salary increase. For the first time, I could save without worry, travel on a whim, and indulge in personal luxuries. Sitting back with a cup of coffee, I relished the realization that this was genuinely my life now, crafted entirely by my own efforts. Curiosity eventually led me to check social media. A part of me was still tethered to the past despite my resolve to move forward. I couldn't help but peek at Lisa's profile, where I discovered a stream of posts depicting her struggles in Florida. "Help, life in Florida is tough. I can't find a job. I don't know what to do anymore," she wrote, her timeline a catalog of desperation. I chuckled softly to myself, seeing how they had floundered without my support. A direct message from Lisa popped up. "Jesse, please help." The Lisa I remembered, always confident and somewhat dismissive, had been replaced by someone who sounded desperate and on the verge of tears. Yet, my heart remained untouched. The old me would have dived in to rescue her without a second thought, but that person was no more. I deleted the message unread and closed the app, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over me. As I set down my phone, I murmured to myself, "They made their bed, now they must lie in it." Sipping my coffee, I realized how free I felt, unburdened by the responsibility for their well-being. They had chosen their path independently, and now they needed to face the consequences of those choices. I was no longer their safety net, and embracing this new chapter, I felt truly liberated. My name's Trace, and I am now 28 years old. I've faced numerous challenges since I was 19, stemming from a complex family situation. At that age, I was a vibrant college sophomore studying psychology, driven by my aspiration to become a clinical psychologist, a dream inspired by the therapist who helped me navigate the grief of losing my father during my childhood. Life at college was promising. I was academically successful, surrounded by supportive friends, and I even had plans to study abroad. But everything took an unexpected turn when my mother, Maggie, who is just 55, fell seriously ill with a chronic condition that severely affected her muscles and joints, causing relentless pain and increasingly limiting her mobility. Medical professionals told us that her condition was progressive and incurable. At home, my younger sister Anna, who was only 17, was dealing with typical teenage challenges. With our father having died in a traffic accident when Anna was a baby, our small family had always relied heavily on each other. Our mother had worked as a legal secretary to support us, but her illness meant she could no longer work. Facing these harsh realities in my tiny dorm room, surrounded by my psychology textbooks, I knew I had to abandon my dreams. There were no other viable options. My mother needed constant care, and it was unfair to burden young Anna with such responsibilities. I vividly remember the day I withdrew from college. My advisor earnestly tried to persuade me to consider part-time studies or a leave of absence, but neither option addressed our immediate financial needs. At 22, I left school and took a full-time job as a receptionist at a local accounting firm. Though the pay was modest, it was steady, and by moving back home, we could save on rent. The transition was hard. I swapped lively academic discussions for answering phones and handling office tasks. Evenings were spent aiding my mother's rehabilitation and helping Anna with her studies. Many nights, I lay awake questioning my decision, yet I continued to push forward, clinging to hope. Over the years, I rose to an administrative role, slightly boosting my income, which helped cover living costs and my mother's medical expenses. I ensured Anna had all she needed for school. As time passed, the likelihood of returning to college seemed ever more distant, yet I never completely let go of that hope, always balancing it with the reality of my responsibilities. My heart was filled with a burning desire to provide my niece, Anna, with the opportunities one had once set aside. Thanks to my dedicated efforts, Anna graduated from high school with a series of scholarships, easing her path to college. I was immensely proud of her, overjoyed by the fact that she would be the first in our family to earn a college degree. The day she received her college acceptance letter, we celebrated with tears of joy and a trip to the local ice cream shop, a nod to a childhood tradition my parents had started when I excelled in school. During this period, I had put my own dreams on hold, including further education and travel, to devote myself to caring for my mother and supporting Anna. Despite my exhaustion, I continued to reassure myself that these sacrifices were for my family's future. Yet, it was challenging not to feel a twinge of envy or dissatisfaction as I watched my friends from college advance in their successful careers and vibrant lives through social media posts. However, there were moments of pure joy, like when my mother had good days when we could watch old movies together, or when Anna would call from college, excitedly sharing her achievements and stories of making new friends. These moments reassured me that my sacrifices were meaningful. Over time, though, I began to feel underappreciated. My mother's health was more stable, but she still required considerable care and rarely acknowledged the sacrifices I made for her, occasionally uttering hurtful comments about what she perceived as my inadequacies. Meanwhile, Anna's contact became sporadic after she started college. She often reached out only when needing financial help, rarely inquiring about us at home. When I browsed through Anna's social media, I saw her thriving socially, sharing photos from trips and outings that seemed worlds away from my own life, widening the emotional distance between us. Even when she returned home on breaks, she spent most of her time reconnecting with old high school friends, largely ignoring our mother and me. However, a significant change occurred last week when Anna graduated from college. Despite everything, I felt a genuine surge of pride and happiness for her achievement. I had planned for months and decided to gift her a simple, elegant watch for her graduation, not flashy, but perfect for job interviews. It was a sentimental gesture, echoing the memory of receiving my first watch from my father at 18. The graduation ceremony was a profoundly emotional experience for me. I wept as Anna walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Yet, at the celebration that followed, my mother and I seemed almost invisible to her, overshadowed by her college friends and her new boyfriend, Harry, whose indifference made us feel like outsiders. This moment underscored the bittersweet nature of my sacrifices, highlighting the complex emotions of pride and distance, hope and isolation, in our family's journey. When I approached Anna to present her with the gift, she brushed me off, claiming she was too busy. There I stood, gift in hand, enveloped in an awkward silence, my heart sinking. I retreated to a corner of the room, trying to hold back tears. It was there that I unintentionally overheard a conversation between Anna and her boyfriend, Harry. She was telling her friends how she felt embarrassed by our family and was looking forward to moving out and starting her new job. She expressed her frustration about feeling held back by us and mentioned her plans to cut ties once she left. Hearing these harsh words from Anna, whom I had deeply loved and supported, sacrificing my aspirations to help with her homework, to finance her education rather than spend on myself, left me reeling with a tumult of emotions. It was a stark revelation of her true feelings towards us. The following day, I gathered the courage to confront her, hoping for an apology or at least some understanding. Instead, I was met with severe criticism. She coldly stated that it was pathetic how I had given up my life for our mother and that she had never requested such sacrifices. She accused me of being jealous of her success and trying to make her feel guilty. During our heated argument, our mother, far from defending me, accused me of being overly dramatic. She suggested I should just let Anna be and be happy for her. At 28, With no degree, a stagnant job, and caring for an unappreciative mother and a resentful sister, I felt a profound sense of loss, my youth and dreams slipping away. I seriously considered the need to find a new place to rediscover myself and focus on my own needs. Yet, the guilt of potentially abandoning our mother, especially if her health deteriorated, weighed heavily on me. These thoughts haunted me, pushing me to communicate my feelings more clearly to both my mother and Anna. I rehearsed over and over, choosing my words carefully to avoid sounding accusatory. I invited Anna over, suggesting we go out for dinner in an attempt to reconcile. Though she agreed reluctantly, I spent the day tidying up and preparing our mother's favorite lasagna, hoping to foster a moment of family warmth that might soften everyone's hearts. However, the evening did not go as planned. Our mother started the conversation by accusing me of making her feel guilty for her illness. She defensively said, "I never asked you to quit college. It was your choice. Do you think I wanted to ruin your life by getting sick?" She recounted how she had cared for her sick father for years without complaint. I tried to explain that I wasn't blaming her, just wanting to express my feelings, but she refused to listen. Anna remained mostly silent throughout, occasionally chipping in that I was being too sensitive and that she didn't mean her words the way I took them. Yet her demeanor said otherwise. She talked about her achievements, her new job offers, and her plans to move to the city. With a dismissive look, she pointedly asked me, "What have you done? You're almost 28, still living at home, just a secretary." At that moment, unable to contain my emotions any longer, tears streamed down my face. The pain of unappreciated sacrifices and the stark contrast between our paths were overwhelming. As I faced Anna, tears streamed down my face, and I asked her why she blamed me for everything that felt wrong in her life. Our mother accused me of stirring up trouble, but I declared that from now on, I would no longer intervene or sacrifice my well-being for them. They seemed shocked by my stance, as if I was exaggerating my suffering. I retorted, "Looking back at these past 8 years, my life has been nothing but misery." Feeling a profound disconnect, I decided there was no reason for me to stay. With a heavy heart, I left the house, my chest tight with a mix of grief and relief. I'm currently staying with my lifelong friend, Natalia, who I've known since high school. She's always been supportive and remains one of the few friends I've kept in touch with over the years. Despite feeling guilty and considering a return home, my resolve was hardened when my mother called me ungrateful. That was the last straw. I ceased all financial support and told my mother that I needed to focus on myself. She tried to guilt-trip me by claiming her health would deteriorate without me, but I stood firm, suggesting she consider other options like hiring home care or asking my sister to step up, suggestions she outright refused. Following a series of accusatory and pleading messages from her, I made the tough decision to block her number. Anna hasn't reached out at all. Natalia's apartment isn't spacious, but it offers me refuge. It feels odd to have free evenings without the rush of home responsibilities. Adapting to this newfound quietude is strange. I'm slowly reacquainting myself with personal freedom and starting to look forward to the future with hope.
It has been a month since I left.
Living with Natalia feels like breathing fresh air after being confined for so long. With some savings, I enrolled in community college, taking an introductory psychology class and an English writing class. Returning to education has been exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Initially, I worried about being the oldest student and keeping up with the coursework. However, my fears were unfounded, as there were other adult learners in my classes, some even older. Juggling home duties, work, and school is daunting, but the stress is of a different kind, one that feels like it's fostering growth rather than mere survival. I've also started therapy to address my familial issues, learn to set boundaries, and boost my self-esteem. My therapist is helping me understand why I felt compelled to sacrifice so much of myself. Last week, I bumped into my Aunt Dorothy at the supermarket. She's always been like a second mother to me, and she inquired about my sudden silence towards my family. I explained my situation briefly. While it's challenging to navigate these familial dynamics, I'm learning to prioritize my own needs and well-being. As I continue to adjust to this new chapter, I feel a mixture of excitement and anxiety about rediscovering who I am beyond my roles at home. It feels like a weight has been lifted knowing that I don't have to bear all the burdens by myself anymore, especially with the unexpected support that has recently come my way. One day, my aunt invited me to a nearby cafe for a significant conversation. Over coffee, she acknowledged the sacrifices I've made for our family, noting how I dropped out of college at 22 to support everyone. She expressed her desire to help and decided to give me a portion of her inheritance. Thanks to her generosity, I received $200,000, which has opened up incredible new possibilities for my life. More than the money, I was touched that my decade-long efforts were finally recognized by someone in the family. With my aunt's help, I've taken the first steps toward a fresh start. I began searching for a new job, and last week, I landed an entry-level position in the HR department of a local nonprofit organization. The job offers a slightly higher salary than my previous one and provides opportunities for career growth. Most importantly, it's meaningful work that aligns with my interests. I am cautiously optimistic about this new chapter, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't in years. I've also resumed hiking, a hobby I loved but had set aside due to my responsibilities. There's a long road ahead to untangle years of codependency and rebuild my life, but I'm committed to moving forward positively, no matter the challenges. Trusting myself and my decisions more, I've seen significant changes that are vastly different from my previous life. My deep interest in psychology has fueled my courage to make these changes, and for the first time, I am in a workplace where my efforts are recognized and valued. I'm continuing with my community college classes, which are going well. Next year, I plan to earn my associate degree, and with continued support from my aunt, I aim to transfer to a 4-year university to pursue a bachelor's degree in psychology. Balancing work and school is challenging, but I'm tackling it with more motivation than ever before. Living with Natalia has helped me feel connected to the community, and while there are tough times, I try not to dwell on them too much. My therapist has been instrumental in helping me manage my emotions and maintain healthy boundaries. Anna has graduated and moved to start her new job in another city. She sent me a message wishing me well, which I haven't responded to. It saddens me that our relationship isn't what it once was, and while I cherish our close moments from the past, I also realize that I must accept this change. I hope for a future conversation where we might reconnect, and surprisingly, that opportunity came sooner than I expected. Before my sister moved, we met up one more time. Initially, I considered leaving due to the tense atmosphere, but I chose to stay and listen. At first, my mother appeared older and more worn than I remembered, which stirred a pang of guilt. However, as the evening progressed, she began to open up and finally acknowledge the support I had provided. This acknowledgement was a small, yet significant, step toward healing our strained relationship. She confessed that for many years, she had not fully appreciated me and was now fearful of losing me altogether. During our conversation, she revealed her journey towards self-care and self-prioritization, aiming to find a balance between her needs and those of others without crossing into selfishness. It's a delicate balancing act, and while I too am navigating my way through forgiving my family and ensuring I don't allow myself to be taken advantage of again, I recognize the road ahead will have its ups and downs. Despite the challenges, I'm confident I'm on the right track and proud of myself for having the strength to initiate these changes. 2 months after moving out, I got a call from my Aunt Dorothy, informing me that my mother had been admitted to the hospital. Her autoimmune disease had worsened significantly since I left. She'd been neglecting her medication, struggling to manage rehabilitation alone, and failing to keep up with daily chores. Rejecting meal delivery services because of her distrust in others' cooking, she had trouble shopping even at nearby stores, leaving her with nothing but spoiled food at home. Following her hospitalization, she had no choice but to accept home care arranged by Aunt Dorothy, including assistance from a social worker and home health aides. During this period, I received a surprising message from my sister, Anna. "Trace, I need to talk to you. Can we chat on the phone when you're free?" Over the phone, she recounted a family gathering where Aunt Dorothy had divulged my decade-long sacrifices and the recent events leading up to our mother's illness. My decision to drop out of college to support the family financially and harsh criticisms from our cousins Megan and Tiffany at a family event had overwhelmed Anna. How could you say such harsh things about your sister, who gave up years of her life? Anna, how could you overlook the fact that your carefree college days were possible because of her sacrifices? Faced with criticism from family and the stark reality of our mother's condition, Anna expressed deep regret for her past actions. Trace, I'm really sorry. I was foolish, seeking recognition in my new circle, ashamed of where I came from. I fooled myself into believing my successes were purely my own and not built upon your sacrifices. Acknowledging her mistakes, Anna mentioned she would return home for the weekend to reflect on how she might contribute to our mother's ongoing care. Anna also offered to contribute a part of her earnings towards our mother's caregiving expenses. However, I'm not quite ready to fully accept her sudden change of heart. It's going to take some time for me to see if her actions really back up her words. Trace, I'd like to take some time off to meet and talk face-to-face, Anna suggested. After giving it some thought, I agreed to a brief meeting over the weekend. When she arrived at the cafe, Anna looked slightly leaner than before. Trace, I'm genuinely sorry. It took others pointing it out for me to see the error of my ways. Though we're apart, please let me help with the caregiving costs using part of my salary. Also, I'll use my long vacations to visit Mom a few times a year and stay in touch with her online. I listened to Anna without sensing any dishonesty, but given our past, I couldn't immediately place my trust in her. Would her promised financial support and regular visits continue? I decided to watch and see how things unfold over time. As for our mother, I occasionally get updates from Aunt Dorothy. Initially, she was bewildered, but she has slowly gotten used to the caregiving service, and her relationship with the caregivers seems to be positive. I'm not ready to see her in person yet, but knowing that she's adjusting well provides some comfort. Aunt Dorothy's efforts have indeed prompted much-needed changes within our family. Still, only time will tell if these changes are sincere. For now, I'm concentrating on my studies and work, maintaining a cautious distance to observe whether each family member lives up to their responsibilities. I've chosen to forge my own path, focusing on my happiness while seeking a balanced relationship with my family. I want to share something that truly baffles me. It's quite unbelievable that someone as unremarkable as myself is getting married before you. You would definitely fit better in that tattered dress, and I'm sure even the groom and the guests would agree if they were honest. I overheard my sister's harsh words as she stood beside the damaged wedding gown, and my heart sank into despair. Yet, as her older sister, I couldn't let her continue with such reckless behavior. I resolved to demonstrate my happiness and ensure she realized the error of her ways. My name is Mira, and at 28, after being with Kelvin for 4 years, I've just filed our marriage paperwork. Our wedding is around the corner. Organizing the invites, choosing the menu, and picking out the floral arrangements have been tough, but these tasks remind me of the love and support from our friends and family over the years, which fuels my drive. I've been especially particular about my wedding dress. Ever since I was young, I dreamed of a pristine white gown, a dream that became a reality once in a lifetime. Though it was expensive, I sometimes wonder if it's okay to indulge for my special day. That dress looks stunning on you, Mira, Kelvin reassured me. It's your dream, right? You've been saving for this for a long time. Encouraged by his words, I plan to wear my chosen dress with pride. The gown I selected is beautifully crafted with layers of tulle and lace, designed by a well-known artist. Just picturing myself in that dress, at the perfect venue, alongside my beloved, fills me with anticipation for our wedding day, a truly blissful moment. However, life has its ups and downs. Mira, do you really think Kelvin will go through with marrying you? He might be having second thoughts, my sister Scarlett teased during a recent visit home. Scarlett, 3 years my junior, lounged on the couch with a smirk. Even if you're joking, that's a cruel thing to say. I shot back. Scarlett has always been outspoken, often taking care of her appearance and constantly checking her reflection. Since childhood, she has made it a point to put me down in public, contrasting her looks with mine and positioning herself as superior. Despite her cutting remarks, I've never felt less than her. Our sibling relationship has always been strained, and her recent comments are no exception. "Hey Mira, remember when Kelvin came over last time? Did he say anything about me?" she prodded. "What are you implying?" I responded, frustrated. "Oh, something like, your sister is so cute, or she's more elegant and beautiful than you," she persisted. Fed up, I decided to leave, but as I walked out, Scarlett muttered under her breath, still bitter about my upcoming marriage. Despite her plain appearance, she didn't seem to care much. "You know, you really should just go home," she said dismissively. This kind of behavior from her wasn't surprising. I went home that day and thought little of it. Interestingly, on the day Kelvin and I were having our pre-wedding photos taken, Scarlett arrived at the location with our parents. "Oh, is this the dress you've chosen for your big day?" Scarlett remarked as she watched the setup. "Scarlett, we're about to start shooting. Could you please step aside?" I requested. That day, I was first in line for a solo photo session in the Grand Cathedral where our wedding would be held. Scarlett wandered around, seemingly oblivious to the inconvenience she caused. Okay, I'm moving. Don't get all starry-eyed just because you're in a wedding dress," she scoffed. "Well, today I am the star. It's my pre-wedding shoot, and we need to keep things moving smoothly," I countered. "You're such a people pleaser, trying to be liked because you're so average. That dress doesn't even suit you," Scarlett whispered harshly, making sure only I could hear. I was taken aback. Just as I was about to retort, Scarlett walked away smirking. The photo shoot began for me, but her words lingered, making it difficult for me to smile genuinely. As the session went on, my smile grew more forced. "Are you feeling nervous?" inquired Kelvin's mother, Mira, a woman of gentle and kind demeanor whom I had met only a few times. "I'm struggling a bit with my smile. Sorry to keep everyone waiting," I admitted. "Don't worry, dear. You look stunning in that dress, and we have all the time to capture your beauty. Take as long as you need," she reassured me warmly. Yet, Scarlett continued to disrupt the peace. "Are you going to be a burden to your in-laws? It's embarrassing to have such an incompetent sister," she criticized loudly. "Scarlett, please stop," I implored. At that moment, my future mother-in-law intervened with a smile. "It's nice of you to join us, Scarlett, but please, this is Mira and my son's moment. Step back a little." She gently ushered Scarlett away, allowing us to focus on the shoot. Despite Scarlett's stern looks and sking, the atmosphere remained tense. "Maybe she feels left out, like I've taken you away from her," Kelvin joked. "I'm sorry about this," I apologized, feeling the weight of Scarlett's presence. But finally, the preparations were complete. No detail was too small for such a significant life event. As the wedding day neared, Kelvin and I left for the venue from our new home. Upon arrival, we headed to separate dressing rooms. The moment I had always dreamed of was nearly here. I was about to step into my ideal wedding dress and vow eternal love to the person I cherished the most. A childhood fantasy was on the verge of becoming a reality, filled with slight nerves and immense joy. I was just about to open the door to the bridal dressing room, ready to begin a new chapter of my life. Unexpectedly, the door swung open from the inside. "Scarlett, why are you coming out of there?" To my shock, it was my sister stepping out, her bag snapping shut with a spiteful smirk. "Oops, I thought this was the bathroom. Isn't it sad you have to get ready in such a shabby room? But it's probably fitting for you." With those stinging words, she quickly left. Even though she was family, it was unusually early for her to be at the venue. Confused by Scarlett's odd behavior, I entered the bridal dressing room and was greeted by a distressing scene. The room, usually serene and beautifully adorned, was in disarray. There, my wedding dress hung, mercilessly slashed and irreparably damaged. "What happened here?" I gasped. The dress, unmistakable with its elegant lace detailing, was meant for me. As I stood there, stunned, The makeup and costume staff entered and saw me frozen in front of the tattered gown. Their expressions mirrored my horror. Upon inquiring, they mentioned that Scarlett had told them she was setting up a surprise for me and had requested everyone leave the room. Could Scarlett have done this? Why would she? I struggled to believe it, yet the evidence was overwhelming. Her resentment had been apparent since my engagement, and her spiteful demeanor during the pre-wedding shoot was hard to ignore. With shaky hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Scarlett's number. "What do you need?" she answered promptly. Fighting back tears, I confronted her. "Scarlett, what were you doing in my dressing room earlier?" "Didn't I tell you? I mistook it for the bathroom. Have you forgotten already?" "Are you that absent-minded?" she retorted. "That's a lie. You ruined my wedding dress, didn't you?" I pushed, emotion heightening my voice. Scarlett laughed dismissively. "Something wrong with the dress? It's awful you suspect me. Maybe this is divine retribution for your bad attitude. It's sick that you enjoy accusing me. Why would you ruin my dress?" I demanded, no longer able to contain my anger. "What a hassle. Do you have any proof it was me?" she said nonchalantly, then added venomously. "Besides, it's odd someone as plain as you is getting married before me. That rag dress suits you better, and even the groom and guests will agree." With that, she hung up. The dress before me was beyond salvage. The staff, having left at my sister's behest supposedly for my benefit, were full of apologies, but their words couldn't mend the gown. I reassured them it was okay, though inside I felt anything but. Amidst this turmoil, a gentle knock came at the door. It was Mira, my future mother-in-law. "Mira, how is your preparation going? What happened here?" she exclaimed upon seeing the chaos inside what looked more like a scene from a tragedy than a wedding. As she took in the sight of the ruined dress, I began to explain, the disappointment heavy in my voice. Mira listened quietly, her face a mixture of sadness and understanding. Fortunately, we had a contingency plan in place, although we never expected to use it. "What do you mean by a backup, Mira?" I asked, curious and hopeful. My mother-in-law, usually a beacon of calm, looked at me with a serious expression. "I have an idea," she said confidently. "If you're with me, I'll support you through this." Her strategy rekindled my determination to salvage a wedding that I had nearly resigned to cancel. "Just watch, Scarlett. I'm going to shine so brightly today and you'll be astonished," I vowed silently. With renewed spirit, the staff rallied around, reinvigorated by my resolve. The day took on a new light, different from the somber mood of the morning. I was ready to face my wedding day head-on. As solemn music filled the magnificent chapel set in the picturesque outdoors, the large doors before me opened. My father stood there, ready to walk me down the aisle. At the altar, Kelvin, my groom, waited with anticipation. As we began our procession, surprised gasps and murmurs rose from the guests. My father, tears in his eyes, walked me down the aisle. Meanwhile, Kelvin, initially unaware of the earlier drama, looked on in amazement. Under my veil, I sneaked a peek at Kelvin's astonished face and scanned the family seats on my side. There, I saw Scarlett, who had clearly expected me to appear in a tattered or hastily prepared dress. Her expression, a mix of shock and disbelief, was priceless. She was so stunned that she stood with her mouth agape, frozen in place. As I reached the end of the aisle and took Kelvin's hand from my father, Scarlett began to fidget nervously with her handkerchief. We exchanged rings, shared our vows, and kissed, then walked down the aisle under a shower of flowers. Passing Scarlett, I noticed the handkerchief she had been twisting finally tore. This ceremony was not about causing distress to my sister, but about celebrating our joy. For a moment, I let go of all thoughts of Scarlett and fully embraced the happiness of the moment. After the group photos outside the chapel, we headed to the reception venue. "It all went so smoothly," I remarked to Kelvin, relieved and happy. "I was really surprised by how beautiful your dress is," he replied, his eyes shining with admiration. As guests moved towards the reception, Scarlett suddenly burst out, "Wait, why are you wearing such a nice dress?" She was pointing at me, her tone a mixture of awe and resentment. What's with that long veil and even wearing a tiara? Your dress is so shiny. Why are you standing out so confidently when you should be less noticeable than me? You don't have the right to be so presumptuous, she accused, her frustration palpable. Despite her outburst, I stood calmly. The dress I wore was indeed stunning, featuring a long veil of fine lace, a glamorous tiara adorned with Swarovski crystals, and silk that shimmered beautifully. The hem's rich volume was reminiscent of a royal wedding, and the chest was modestly yet elegantly embellished with more crystals. It doesn't matter whether I'm seen as beautiful or not. Every bride has the right to wear a dress she loves and to have a wonderful day, I responded firmly. You've always looked down on me, Scarlett, but who do you think you are to judge? Everyone deserves to feel special on their wedding day. Scarlett's views were outdated and harsh, believing in a hierarchy based on beauty. But today, surrounded by love and support, I felt above such petty concerns, truly radiant in a moment that belonged solely to me and Kelvin. I'm the one who really takes care of herself and looks beautiful, Scarlett proclaimed as she turned to the guests with a malicious smirk. The room fell silent. Shock was evident on everyone's faces, including our parents. Misinterpreting their silence as agreement, Scarlett's confidence soared.
See?
I'm definitely more beautiful, yet I don't have a boyfriend, and my less attractive sister gets married first. It's just not fair, she ranted, her glare intensifying as she suddenly lunged towards me. It's shameful that someone like you is wearing this. Take it off right now and apologize for the dress. Scarlett, wait. This is an important wedding dress borrowed from Kelvin's mom. It's the dress she wore at her wedding. Please don't touch it. I cried out, trying to shield the gown. Quickly, the venue staff and Kelvin intervened, holding Scarlett back. Initially, she resisted, but she paused when she heard the dress's history. Wait, that means it's a second-hand dress? So you were wearing rags after all. Treating something second-hand so preciously, you really are poor. Plus, being given rags by your mother-in-law, you're already being bullied, aren't you? No dreams or hopes at all serves you right, she sneered. I will not let you call this a rag, I responded firmly, just as the guests murmured disapprovingly. At that moment, Kelvin's mother stepped forward with a calm smile and explained, this dress is a haute couture piece, specially made. It cost $320,000 when it was first created. $320,000? Scarlett gasped in shock. Kelvin's mother continued, the price of silk and crystals has gone up since then, so it might be even more valuable now. We've had specialists handle its storage, so it's in perfect condition. Hearing this, Scarlett's face went pale. Realizing the value of what she had scorned impacted her visibly. Why would you give such an expensive item to my sister? She stammered in disbelief. Because Mira is very kind and will make a wonderful bride, Kelvin's mother explained gently. It makes me very happy to think that my precious wedding dress is being worn by my dear daughter-in-law. That's not the point. Why was such an amazing dress prepared in the first place? Scarlett pressed, unable to let go. Kelvin's mother then smiled knowingly at Scarlett. Do you remember how harshly you glared at Mira during the pre-wedding shoot? Even after I pulled you away, I noticed you kept looking at that dress on your phone. I suspected you were planning something. I thought you were just a clueless old woman, Scarlett muttered. Yes, our family and my husband are wealthy, so we're sensitive to malice from others, Kelvin's mother replied smoothly. This comment further unnerved Scarlett. What? You are wealthy, so Kelvin is rich too? He's rich and handsome, so why did he choose my sister? Scarlett screamed, her confusion and frustration mounting. Why did I marry Mira? Actually, I was planning to talk about it in my speech at the reception, Kelvin answered shyly, turning to Scarlett, who was now red with anger and curiosity. When I first went out to eat with Mira, she suggested we split the bill. It was the first time someone had ever suggested that to me, and I was surprised. Plus, she proposed splitting the cost of our new apartment's rent and even the wedding expenses. Going Dutch? I don't understand. If Kelvin is rich, he should pay for everything. Is he lacking in generosity? Mira, You should let a man lead and spoil you. That's why you're a flawed woman, Scarlett criticized harshly. That's exactly it, Kelvin interjected. Every woman I've dated saw me only as a wallet. Mira is different. She values equality and partnership, and that's why I love her. Kelvin spoke up, his voice steady and sincere. Mira is truly independent, the first woman I've met like that. I realized I didn't want to be with anyone else but her. He shared his deep admiration and love for me, which only seemed to irritate Scarlett further. She clicked her tongue dismissively. I can't stand listening to this. It's so boring. I'm not interested in a reception where such a plain sister is the star. Maybe I should just go home. With that, she let out a huff of frustration, her shoulders slumping in defeat. This was typical of Scarlett. She would stir up drama until she either got her way or lost interest. Throughout our lives, I had always endured her antics as her sister, but it was troubling that her behavior hadn't matured with age. Looks like I have to give her one last lesson, I thought, catching her arm as she began to yawn, signaling her planned departure. This is a good opportunity to tell you. You'll have to pay for the dress you ruined, I stated firmly. Scarlett grimaced, then laughed with a touch of triumph. Me? Ruin the dress? There's no proof of that. Why don't you save your sleep talking for bedtime, she scoffed, attempting to shrug off my hand. She seemed pleased with herself, thinking she had successfully spoiled my day. However, I maintained a calm demeanor and nodded. Unfortunately for you, everything was recorded on the surveillance cameras installed in the bridal dressing room. I'm even considering filing a criminal complaint for property damage. I hate to involve the police in family matters at a wedding, but... What? You can do that at weddings. Scarlett's laughter faded into a look of surprise and panic. I continued to explain, still calm. It's not a usual option, but I had it installed just for today, and it will be removed tomorrow. How can you just install and remove things on your own? That's ridiculous. This venue is the wedding venue that I run. Scarlett's confusion deepened. You run this venue? I thought you were just a plain office worker. Whether I'm plain or not, I was indeed an office worker until recently. However, my passion for wedding dresses and weddings grew, and I decided to establish my own ideal wedding venue. It wasn't just my savings. Kelvin's mother, who is also an investor, supported me. This allowed me to pursue my dream and manage a wedding venue designed especially for brides. This place you manage? Scarlett was incredulous. Absolutely not. I've never heard such a thing from Mom or Dad. I asked them to keep my entrepreneurship a secret from you. I thought you would say it's presumptuous of me to run a company, given my ugly appearance. Scarlett's face, initially filled with anger and confusion, gradually softened as she listened to my story. However, her reaction was predictable as her thoughts turned opportunistic. So, you're saying we have lots of wealthy relatives, ah? Then, can you introduce me to a wealthy man, right? Scarlett's mood quickly shifted to excitement, missing the point entirely. Scarlett, do you think we can continue our relationship as sisters? You tore up a dress I was deeply attached to. I never want to see your face again, I stated, the finality in my voice clear. Why are you saying that? It was just a little prank. I said I'm sorry, didn't I? Scarlett's apology was superficial, lacking sincerity, and she still acted with her usual carelessness. That wasn't just a little prank. I will never forgive you for this, I responded, my anger reaching its limit. It's fortunate I'm wearing this beautiful dress from Kelvin's mother right now. It's a reminder of the support and love I actually have on this special day. The dress Scarlett ruined was not just a garment. It was something I held dear. I will definitely seek compensation, I asserted firmly, seeing her disbelief. You're planning to seek compensation? How much does a wedding dress even cost? I don't have real savings, Scarlett stammered, her voice shaky. If you don't pay, I'll have to involve the police. Did you think you could bully your plain sister all your life and always be forgiven? This is serious, Scarlett. It's time to grow up. Faced with my stern response, Scarlett seemed to deflate, the fight draining out of her. Watching our parents weep, tears different from the joyful ones shed earlier at the ceremony, I saw the pain Scarlett's selfishness had caused them. Mira is truly splendid. She's exactly the kind of entrepreneur I envisioned, Kelvin's mother shared proudly, turning to Kelvin. I was fortunate to have her wear the dress and to have invested in her business. Mom, that's my line. Please don't steal it, Kelvin joked, easing the tension. Watching them converse so warmly, I couldn't help but smile, relieved. After sending a crestfallen Scarlett home, the reception resumed warmly. Despite the earlier troubles, it became a memorable celebration for me, strengthening my bond with the family I was joining. Following the wedding, our parents, unable to overlook Scarlett's actions any longer, made a tough decision. They expelled her from the family home, apologizing to me for their previous leniency and firmly denouncing her behavior. Without a job change and forced to pay for the damaged dress, Scarlett rented a small apartment close to our parent house. Staying local, she inevitably encountered old acquaintances. News of her outburst at my wedding spread, and she found herself increasingly ostracized, which eventually drove her to relocate out of state. The long commute and the cost of living strained her finances severely. Her once lavish spending on makeup and fashion ceased. Now, she barely managed day-to-day expenses, her appearance at work becoming increasingly unkempt. Her only solace was social media, where her posts, filled with despair, gradually alienated even her online friends. Meanwhile, life for Kelvin and I flourished. Encouraged by investors and inspired by my mother-in-law, I started creating unique wedding dresses at our venue. Though the task was new and challenging, the joy of crafting the perfect dress from exquisite tulle, lace, and silk was irreplaceable. Every time I saw a bride I had dressed radiating happiness on her special day, I found renewed joy in weddings. This work not only healed the sting of the past, but also affirmed my love for what I did. I'm thankful every day for Kelvin's love and my mother-in-law's unwavering support. And, oddly enough, I am a bit grateful to Scarlett. Her actions, though harsh, reaffirmed my passion for wedding dresses and helped me realize how much I cherished creating them. The ordeal was painful, but it brought clarity and purpose to my life, turning a challenging moment into the catalyst for a fulfilling career and a happier life.